There is nowhere to hide in the open blue. In the shallow reefs, survival is a matter of geography. A fish can slip into a crack in the coral, weave through the roots of mangrove, or bury itself in the shifting sands of the seafloor. But out here, in the pelagic void, the ocean offers zero sanctuary. The environment is infinite, a boundless three-dimensional desert of water, where cover is a physical impossibility. When a threat appears in this space, you cannot outsmart it by breaking line of sight. You cannot vanish into the architecture of the earth. Out here, there is only one defense mechanism available. You have to run. And that is exactly what the predator is counting on. The pursuit does not announce itself with a violent explosion of water. It begins almost imperceptibly. A shimmering cloud of sardines moves as a collective intelligence near the surface, nervous and reactive. From the deeper, colder shadows below, a shape materializes. It does not launch itself like a missile into the center of the school. It simply locks onto a single target at the fraying edge of the bait cloud and matches its speed. Instinct takes over instantly. The sardine's nervous system screams in alarm. It fires its muscles in a frantic, explosive burst of acceleration. It darts sharply to the left, attempting a chaotic zigzag maneuver designed to throw off a pursuer. It surges forward, burning through its energy reserves to put as much distance as possible between itself and the shadow. But when the sardine levels out and the panic momentarily clears, the shadow is still there. It hasn't fallen behind. It hasn't closed the gap either. It is holding its position with mechanical, terrifying precision. The predator is a tuna, and it is playing a completely different game. Most predators in the ocean are sprinters. They are built for the ambush. They rely on the element of surprise and a massive, momentary expenditure of energy. If an ambush hunter misses its target in the first few seconds of the strike, it usually abandons the chase. The metabolic cost of continuing is simply too high. But the tuna is not an ambush hunter. The tuna is the ocean's ultimate endurance athlete. It is not trying to catch the sardine in the first 10 seconds. It is trying to break the sardine over the next 10 minutes. To understand this hunt, you have to look beneath the skin, down into the cellular machinery of these two animals. The sardine is fast, incredibly fast, but its speed is a desperate illusion. Its muscles rely heavily on anaerobic respiration. This means that to achieve those blinding bursts of acceleration, its body is burning energy without using oxygen. It's a biological emergency override, giving the fish immense power for a few fleeting moments. But there is a heavy tax on the system. Every time the sardine surges, lactic acid floods its tissues. Its muscles begin to burn. Its energy stores plummet rapidly. It is a biological time bomb, ticking down to complete physical failure. Behind it, the tuna operates on an entirely different physiological paradigm. Look at its body. It is a masterclass in hydrodynamic engineering. It resembles a torpedo, rigidly streamlined so that water flows over it with almost zero resistance. Its pectoral fins retract into specialized grooves in its body to eliminate drag. But the true weapon lies in its tail. The tail is crescent-shaped and incredibly stiff, driven by massive sheets of muscle. It doesn't just push water, it slices through it, converting every single muscle contraction into pure forward thrust. But the real advantage is internal. Unlike the cold-blooded prey it chases, the tuna possesses a biological cheat code. Its muscles are packed with myoglobin, a protein that binds and stores oxygen with extraordinary efficiency, giving its flesh that deep, dark red color. Furthermore, the tuna has evolved a highly specialized network of blood vessels called rete mirabile. This acts as a countercurrent heat exchange system. As a tuna's massive swimming muscles generate heat from exertion, this heat is not lost to the cold ocean water. Instead, it is captured and transferred back into blood flowing into the muscles. The tuna is effectively warming its own blood. It keeps its core temperature, its brain, and its eyes significantly warmer than the surrounding sea. Because its muscles are warm, the enzymes within them fire much faster. The tuna's metabolic engine is running hot, clean, and highly oxygenated, while the sardine's engine is cold, starved for oxygen, and choking on its own toxic byproducts. This is not a chase. It is a countdown. As the minutes drag on, the ocean feels less like an escape route and more like an endless treadmill. The sardines' movements begin to lose their crispness. The sharp, erratic darts that once defined evasion tactics become sluggish, rounding out into predictable curves. The frantic beating of its tail loses its rhythm. Exhaustion is setting in at a cellular level. The fish is suffocating from the inside out, its muscles screaming for oxygen that its gills can no longer supply fast enough. And still, the dark shape remains perfectly positioned behind it. The tuna does not display panic. It does not display urgency. It simply keeps the pressure applied. It is waiting for the inevitable collapse. But the terror of the tuna extends far beyond the solitary chase. When these predators hunt in groups, they elevate this physiological warfare to a macro scale. A solitary tuna is a lethal endurance runner, but a school of tuna is a highly coordinated siege engine. When a pack locates a massive bait ball, a swirling vortex of thousands of anchovies or sardines, they do not just charge in blindly. They establish a perimeter, working together. The tuna begin to circle the bait ball, forcing the smaller fish to bunch tighter and tighter together. They corral the prey, pushing them upward toward the surface of the ocean. The surface acts as a ceiling, an impenetrable barrier that cuts off half of the prey's escape routes. The bait ball becomes incredibly dense, a spinning sphere of panic. Inside that sphere, the conditions for the prey are nightmarish. Because they are packed so tightly, the smaller fish constantly collide with one another. To avoid the snapping jaws of the edges of the ball, the fish in the center must constantly fight to stay in the middle, swimming frantically in a perpetual loop of terror. This environment accelerates their exhaustion exponentially. Every sudden directional shift, every scramble for the safer interior of the bait ball, drains their rapidly depleting anaerobic reserves. Meanwhile, the tuna operate with chilling efficiency. They rotate. The hunters at the front of the assault will make a high-speed pass to the bait ball, snapping up the slowest individuals, and then they will peel away to the outer edges of the formation. As they fall back, fresh tuna surge forward to take their place. The predators are sharing the workload. They are allowing each other moments of relative rest to process oxygen and clear their muscles, while the prey inside the bait ball receives no rest at all. Every single fish inside that spinning mass is burning fuel simultaneously, with no chance to recover. Sometimes, this cooperative hunt moves vertically. The ocean is not a uniform pool of water. It is layered with different temperatures. The surface may be warm, but if you dive deep enough, you hit the thermocline, a stark boundary where the water temperature plunges dramatically. Tuna will often force a school of prey downward into these freezing depths. For the cold-blooded mackerel or sardine, crossing this thermal boundary is devastating. The sudden drop in temperature saps their remaining strength, drastically slowing their muscle function and dulling their reaction times. But the tuna, with its internal heat exchange system, is largely immune to this sudden chill. Its core remains warm. Its muscles remain explosive. By driving the prey into the deep cold, the tuna strips away their final physical defenses. It is a calculated manipulation of the environment to guarantee a kill, whether hunting alone or as a synchronized army. The tuna's strategy remains grounded in the same unforgiving mathematics. It is the monetization of panic. The predator understands instinctively that prey animals are hardwired to sprint. Millions of years of evolution have taught small fish that the best way to survive a shark or a barracuda is to explode with sudden speed. But that very evolutionary safeguard is the exact mechanism the tuna exploits. The tuna weaponizes a prey's own survival instinct against it by remaining just close enough to trigger the flight response, but never pushing hard enough to end the chase quickly. The tuna ensures that the prey will run itself to death. The prey is doing the work for the predator. It is tenderizing its own flesh, burning out its own nervous system, fighting a battle that was mathematically lost the second it began. The ocean stretches out forever. The water is clear, devoid of obstacles. For the isolated sardine, the end does not come with sudden, violent ambush. It comes as a slow, agonizing realization that its body will no longer obey its commands. The violent thrashing of its tail becomes a weak, pathetic tremor. Its forward momentum stalls. It begins to drift, the anoxic environment inside its own body finally shutting down its motor functions. It has not been outrun. It has been outlasted. Only then, when the prey is fundamentally broken, does the tuna close the final few feet. There is no wild snapping of jaws. There is no struggle. The tuna glides forward with minimal effort, opens its mouth just wide enough, and engulfs the exhausted animal. The bite is clinical, precise, and profoundly inevitable. The tuna does not need to be the fastest creature in the ocean when the hunt begins. It only needs to be the one that is still moving when the running finally stops. The school is a masterpiece of biological engineering. To watch it move through the sunlit shallows is to witness a kind of fluid mathematics, a living algorithm solving the problem of survival in real time. Thousands of silver bodies hover in the water column, suspended in perfect unison. They do not have a leader. They do not follow commands. Instead, they operate as a superorganism, bound together by an invisible network of sensory data. Every single fish is locked into the geometry of the group, maintaining a precise distance from its neighbor. If one moves, the entire formation ripples in response, a synchronized wave of muscle and scale that shifts and flows like liquid mercury. From a distance, this formation appears impenetrable. It is a fortress built not of stone or shell, but of confusion. This is a selfish herd theory in action. By clustering so tightly together, each individual fish statistically reduces its own chance of being eaten. The school overwhelms the senses of a predator. A hunter looking at the shimmering, shifting mass cannot easily isolate a single target. The brain struggles to track one shape amidst 1,000 identical, overlapping shapes. This uniformity is the school's ultimate shield. In this geometry, survival is shared and safety is found in absolute conformity. But the ocean is a laboratory of countermeasures. For every defense, time and evolution engineer a key, and hovering just at the periphery of vision, drifting in the fractured light of the tropical sun, is a predator designed specifically to pick the lock. You do not see the barracuda approach. You only see a glitch in the light. In these shallow waters, the sun penetrates the surface in brilliant, dancing shafts. The light scatters, reflecting off suspended sand particles and the silver flanks of schooling fish, creating a chaotic environment of glare and shadow. The barracuda does not try to hide in the dark. It does not wait behind coral heads or bury itself in the sand. It hides directly inside the light. Look closely at the skin of the barracuda. It is not matte. It is armored in highly reflective scales, layered with microscopic crystals that act as millions of tiny mobile mirrors. When the predator glides through the sunlit water, it does not cast a solid silhouette. Instead, it reflects its surroundings perfectly. It mirrors the blue of the void. It mirrors the white of the sand. But most importantly, it mirrors the brilliant, flashing silver the prey it is hunting. The barracuda drifts. It is a long, rigid missile of muscle, suspended in the water column with almost no discernible movement. It is studying the flow of the school. It is an observer, a patient calculating machine, watching the synchronized dance of its prey. It knows that attempting to charge the center of a perfectly unified school is a waste of energy. It would merely push the water, and the school would part around it like a curtain, closing seamlessly behind its tail. So it waits. It waits for the one thing that can destroy the superorganism, a tiny, almost imperceptible moment of instability. Perhaps the current shifts unexpectedly. Perhaps a shadow from a passing seabird causes a localized flinch. Perhaps just one or two fish at the edge of the formation misjudge their spacing for a fraction of a second, causing a momentary thinning of the ranks. The school synchronization wavers. The geometry loosens. That is the trigger. The barracuda does not swim. It detonates. The muscles running down the length of its elongated body fire in a massive, coordinated sequence. Its broad, deeply forked tail kicks against the water with explosive force, propelling the predator from a dead standstill to blistering speed in the blink of an eye. But this is not a sustained pursuit like the tuna. This is a ballistic strike. The barracuda has a very limited supply of anaerobic energy for this kind of acceleration. It has one shot, and the window of opportunity is measured in milliseconds. As it closes a distance, it does not aim for a specific fish. It aims for the formation itself. It approaches from an oblique angle, often slicing upward from below where the glare of the surface sun is at its most blinding. And as it penetrates the outer edge of the school, the optical illusion reaches its terrifying climax. The schooling fish rely on two primary senses to maintain their formation: their vision, which tracks the high-contrast silver flashes of their neighbors, and their lateral line system, a network of fluid-filled canals under their skin that detects minute changes in water pressure. When the barracuda enters the mass, its highly reflective body matches the shimmer of the school perfectly. It generates the exact same visual cues the fish use to orient themselves. To the panicked nervous systems of the prey, the predator does not register as an invader. For one fatal, catastrophic heartbeat, the barracuda registers as just another silver flash within the school. The signals conflict. The lateral lines scream that a massive object is displacing water, but the eyes see only the familiar, blinding shimmer of silver. The biological software of the school crashes. The superorganism fractures. Unable to resolve the sensory paradox, the fish break the cardinal rule of their survival. They break formation. The tight, unified sphere shatters into hundreds of isolated, panicked individuals darting in wildly conflicting directions. Some collide with one another. Some freeze in momentary sensory overload. Some try to blindly reform the school, turning back toward the center of the chaos. The fortress of confusion has been turned against them. The barracuda has weaponized their own camouflage. Now, time slows down for the hunter. In the center of this swirling, flashing vortex of panic, the barracuda does not snap its jaws wildly. It does not attempt to catch as many fish as possible. It is surrounded by a feast, but it remains coldly selective. It is looking for the mistake. It ignores the fish that are fleeing effectively. It ignores the ones that are swimming away in straight lines. Its large, highly adapted eyes lock onto the single fish that hesitates. The one that turned left when it should have turned right. The one that stalled for a microsecond trying to process the collapse of its world. The jaws of the barracuda are a nightmare of evolutionary engineering. They are long, narrow, and lined with terrifyingly disproportionate, dagger-like teeth. These teeth are not meant for holding or chewing. They are meant to shear. As the barracuda overtakes the isolated, disoriented fish, it snaps its jaws shut with devastating force. It aims directly for the mid-body, severing the spine, instantly destroying the prey's propulsion system. The strike is over in an instant. The jaws close. The momentum carries the predator entirely through the remnants of the school and out into the open water on the other side. The barracuda does not stick around to admire its work. It does not linger in the debris field. The ocean is full of opportunistic scavengers, and the chaotic vibrations of the strike are already ringing to the water, calling sharks, jacks, and other predators to the scene. The barracuda turns sharply, the severed prey secured firmly in its teeth, and glides away into the blue glare, dissolving back into the light as quickly as it appeared. Behind it, the water slowly calms. The scattered survivors of the bait school begin to find each other again. The chemical scent of their neighbor draws them back together. The geometry reestablishes itself. The superorganism heals its wound, pulling tight into a dense, shimmering sphere once more. They are fewer now, but they're more alert, more synchronized, their discipline refined by the terror they just survived. The barracuda's existence ensures the school's perfection. By constantly hunting the flawed, the slow, and the hesitant, it forces the prey to maintain absolute uniformity. It is a brutal, unyielding editor of the ocean's genetic code. To survive the barracuda, the school must be perfect. But as the predator circling in the invisible glare has already proven, perfection is fragile. And when the light hits the water just right, the barracuda will be there, waiting to turn their safety into glass and shatter it all over again. The twitch of an antenna, a subtle shift in the water current. The crustacean nervous system is a marvel of ancient, streamlined efficiency, hardwired over hundreds of millions of years for one singular purpose: the absolute immediacy of escape. The shrimp hovering over the reef does not need to consciously process danger. It only needs to detect an anomaly. When a shadow falls or a pressure wave ripples against its microscopic sensory hairs, a specialized neural circuit fires. The tail flexes. In a fraction of a heartbeat, the animal should be gone, violently propelling itself backward into the safety of the coral labyrinth. The mechanism is perfect. It is a biological reflex that has ensured the survival of this species since before the continents took their current shapes. And yet, the shrimp does not move. It is suspended in the open water, fully exposed, its legs twitching with nervous, unspent energy. The danger is not hidden. It is hovering less than a foot away, directly in the shrimp's line of sight. But the shrimp survival software has been corrupted. The instinct to flee has been overwritten by a catastrophic neurological failure. The animal is completely paralyzed, not by a neurotoxin in the water, not by physical restraint, but by light, hovering just above the seabed, defying gravity with a gentle, undulating flutter of a translucent fin skirt, is the cuttlefish. It does not look like a predator. It looks like an apparition, a piece of alien architecture dropped into the shallow sea. And right now, its entire body is cascading with rolling waves of pure darkness and sudden, blinding light. Thick, high-contrast bands of black and white are pulsing rapidly down the length of its mantle, flowing from the top of its head to the tips of its resting arms. The pattern repeats in a relentless, hypnotic rhythm, like a strobe light filtering through a spinning fan. To understand the terror of this moment, you must look at it not through human eyes, but through the primitive, binary visual cortex of the prey. Small marine animals rely on highly specific visual triggers to understand their environment. They look for sharp silhouettes. They track the velocity of approaching edges. If an edge is growing larger in their field of vision, it means an object is moving toward them, and the brain sends a signal to run. The cuttlefish is actively hacking that visual processing center. The rhythmic, strobing bands of light and dark flowing across its skin create a phenomenon known in optical physics as motion dazzle. The rapidly shifting contrast destroys the shrimp's ability to locate the true edge of the predator. It destroys the shrimp's ability to calculate speed. To the prey's overwhelmed brain, the alternating pulses of black and white create the illusion of movement in multiple directions at once, or perhaps no forward movement at all. The cuttlefish is physically drifting closer, inch by agonizing inch, but the strobing pattern acts as a cloaking device for its forward velocity. The shrimp's brain cannot resolve the conflicting data. The visual cortex is flooded with a maximum intensity stimulus. The circuits overload. The result is a total cognitive freeze. The prey is trapped in a loop of sensory processing, unable to output a motor command. It stands perfectly still, locked in place by a light show, watching its own executioner approach. This is not a physical hunt. It is psychological warfare, and the battlefield is the living skin of the cephalopod. The skin of the cuttlefish is arguably the most complex two-dimensional structure in the animal kingdom. It is not merely a barrier against the water. It is a high-definition, interactive display screen wired directly into the animal's brain. This biological monitor is built in 3 distinct microscopic layers, each serving a specific optical function. The top layer is composed of chromatophores. These are tiny elastic sacs filled with dense pigments, blacks, browns, reds, and yellows. Each individual sac is tethered to a radiating network of microscopic muscles. When the cuttlefish's brain fires an electrical impulse, those muscles contract, pulling the sac wide open, instantly flooding that microscopic pixel of skin with color. When the muscles relax, the sac shrinks back to a microscopic dot and the color vanishes. The cuttlefish possesses millions of these chromatophores and controls each one with the precision of a pianist playing a keyboard. Beneath the chromatophores lies a second layer, the iridophores. These are completely different. They do not contain pigment. Instead, they are made of stacked crystalline plates that reflect light structurally, catching the ambient rays of the sun and bouncing them back as iridescent greens, blues, and silvers. By altering the spacing between these microscopic plates, the cuttlefish can tune the exact wavelength of light it reflects. And beneath that is a third layer, the leucophores. These are flattened, heavily branched cells that act as a pure white canvas, catching whatever ambient light is available in the environment and scattering it outward. They provide the brilliant, high-contrast background that makes the dark chromatophores pop with such violent intensity. When the cuttlefish decides to hunt, it synchronizes these 3 layers. It expands the dark pigment sacs in rolling waves, while simultaneously exposing the brilliant white leucophore beneath them. It generates a hypnotic pulse in real time, completely bypassing the need to physically chase its prey. As the hypnotic display reaches a crescendo, the predator's body continues its slow, imperceptible drift forward. It moves without disturbing the water. The delicate ruffled fin that circles its mantle undulates in a continuous sine wave pattern, providing frictionless hovering and absolute stability. It generates zero turbulence. The lateral line of the shrimp, the sensory organ designed to feel the approach of a swimming fish, registers absolutely nothing. Guiding this entire operation are the eyes. The eyes of the cuttlefish are a marvel of alien design. They feature a bizarre, deeply indented W-shaped pupil. In the bright, glaring light of the shallow reef, this shape restricts sunlight from entering vertically, protecting the sensitive retina while maintaining a sweeping, panoramic view of the horizontal plane. The cuttlefish can see almost 360 degrees around its body without ever turning its head. More astonishingly, the eyes operate independently. While one eye remains locked with laser precision on the paralyzed shrimp, the other eye is swiveling, scanning the surrounding reef for approaching sharks, moray eels, or competing predators. It is processing the hunt and the environment simultaneously, dividing its massive, highly folded brain into separate, fully functional analytical streams. The gap is closing. The distance is now measured in inches. The cuttlefish must calculate the strike perfectly. If it fires too early, the tentacles will reach their maximum extension before hitting the target, and the sudden displacement of water will snap the shrimp out of its trance. If it waits too long, the cognitive overload in the prey's brain might break, and the flight reflex will finally trigger. The predator's brain evaluates the distance, the water density, the angle of the current, and the exact state of the prey's paralysis. Then, the flashing stops. The sudden cessation of the strobe light is jarring. It is a biological jump scare. For a fraction of a millisecond, the shrimp is plunged from sensory overload into sensory silence. The brain attempts to reboot. The tail finally receives a command to flex. But the cuttlefish has already fired. From deep within a hidden pocket at the base of its 8 arms, 2 specialized feeding tentacles erupt into the water. The speed of the strike defies the physics of the surrounding fluid. These tentacles are muscular hydrostats, biological structures composed almost entirely of densely packed muscle fibers and fluid, with no bones or skeletal support whatsoever. They function on the same biomechanical principle as an elephant's trunk or a chameleon's tongue, but optimized for explosive, ballistic velocity in a dense aquatic medium. The muscles at the base of the tentacles contract with violent force, displacing the fluid inward and propelling the tips forward at a speed that is entirely invisible to human eye, let alone the processing power of shrimp. The tentacle clubs, flattened pads lined with serrated, heavily toothed suction cups, slam into the carapace of prey. The impact is crushing, but the suction is inescapable. Before the shrimp's tail can even complete its first backward contraction, the muscular hydrostats reverse direction. They snap back like tightened rubber bands, reeling the prey instantly into the center of the cuttlefish's arms. There, hidden beneath the fleshy webbing, lies a beak made of chitin, the same material as a crab shell. It is razor sharp and shaped remarkably like the beak of a parrot. The arms hold the shrimp perfectly still. The beak bites down, effortlessly scissoring through the exoskeleton, severing the nerve cord and ending the life of the prey in a single surgical motion. The illusion is over. The cuttlefish relaxes. The stark, violent bands of black and white melt away, replaced instantly by the mottled, granular texture of the sandy seafloor below. The predator disappears back into the background noise of the reef, chewing its meal in perfect, undetected silence. But to view the cuttlefish merely as a hypnotic assassin is to underestimate the terrifying depth of its intelligence. The display screen on its skin is not just a weapon. It is a complex, high-bandwidth communication system. In the chaotic environment of a mating ground, a male cuttlefish will use this biological monitor to manipulate multiple individuals at the exact same time. The brain is capable of literally splitting the body's display right down the center line. If a male is attempting to court a female, while a rival male approaches from the opposite side, the cuttlefish will divide itself in half. On the side facing the female, it will display a calm, mottled, attractive pattern, signaling gentle courtship and safety. On the side facing the rival male, it will simultaneously project violent, aggressive, high-contrast zebra stripes, signaling dominance and warning. It is holding 2 entirely different conversations, displaying 2 entirely different personalities, powered by one brain, executed on a single canvas of skin. This degree of control translates directly into the hunt. The cuttlefish does not just spam the pulsing light blindly, it calibrates it. If a hunt takes place in murky, turbid water, the cuttlefish will increase the contrast and slow the frequency of the pulse, ensuring the pattern cuts through the suspended silt. If the prey begins to drift sideways, showing signs of shaking off the hypnosis, the cuttlefish will alter the angle of the bands, shifting the geometry of the illusion to compensate for the prey's movement. It is a predator that reads feedback. If a strike fails, if a shrimp manages to snap backward just in time, the cuttlefish does not repeat the exact same sequence on the next attempt. It remembers. It tweaks the variable. It flashes faster. It creeps closer. It iterates on its own methodology. This is a hallmark of a deeply intelligent, problem-solving mind locked inside the body of an invertebrate. And yet, for all its neurological superiority, the cuttlefish is profoundly vulnerable. It lives in a world of heavily armored crabs, thick-scaled fish, and apex sharks. The cuttlefish has no shell. It has no scales. Its body is entirely soft, a gelatinous package of high-value protein that any predator on the reef would gladly consume. Its only internal structure is a cuttlebone, a highly porous, chalky internal shell used strictly to regulate buoyancy by pumping gas and liquid in and out of microscopic chambers. It provides zero physical defense against a set of jaws. Because it is so physically fragile, its survival depends entirely on never being seen for what it truly is. It must always be something else. It must be a piece of algae swaying in the current. It must be a clump of coral rubble on the sand. And when it is time to feed, it must be a hallucination. It cannot afford to engage in a physical struggle. It cannot afford a chase that draws the attention of larger hunters. Every hunt must be a perfect, silent assassination, executed to the absolute manipulation of the victim's reality. As the sun begins to set, the light on the reef shifts. The shadows lengthen. A small crab scurries across the open sand, highly alert, its compound eyes scanning for the movement of a threat. It sees nothing but a ripple of sand. It feels no pressure wave. It registers no danger. Then, the sand itself begins to pulse. Dark shadows roll out of nowhere. The crab stops. The arms rise. The trap springs. The cuttlefish does not overpower the ocean with muscle. It does not conquer the reef with speed. It survives by rewriting the rules of perception, hacking the minds of everything around it, and proving that the most dangerous weapon in the sea is not a tooth or a claw or a spine. The most dangerous weapon is a lie told so perfectly, the victim forgets how to run. The crab is convinced it has won the game of survival. It has retreated deep into a jagged fissure within the coral reef, wedging it hard, calcified carapace tightly against the unyielding stone. It raises its claws, presenting a formidable, armored front to the open ocean. From this vantage point, it commands a single entrance to its sanctuary. Any predator foolish enough to attempt a frontal assault will be met with the crushing mechanical force of those pincers. The crab's sensory antennae twitch, reading the water currents. There are no sudden movements. There are no looming shadows. The perimeter appears secure, but the crab has made a fatal miscalculation. It is anticipating a predator that fights according to the standard rules of the ocean, a predator that relies on momentum, jaw strength, and direct confrontation. It is waiting for a threat to charge through the front door. It does not realize that the walls of its fortress are already breathing. Just inches above the crab's entrenched position, a patch of what appears to be algae-covered rock begins to shift. It does not swim into view. It simply detaches from the background reality of the reef. A pale, muscular appendage flows silently down the exterior face of the coral, flattening itself against the jagged terrain so perfectly that it seems to melt into the cracks. It moves with a terrifying liquid grace, completely devoid of skeletal restriction. Another appendage follows from a blind angle, wrapping around the side of the fissure. A third probes the ceiling. The crab continues to face forward, claws raised in defiance, completely oblivious to the silent, suffocating encirclement happening in the periphery. This is the terror of the octopus. It does not conquer the reef by swimming faster than its prey. It does not overpower its victims in a violent clash of muscle and bone. It conquers through pure geometry. It perceives the three-dimensional architecture of the environment, evaluates the negative space, and then fluidly rearranges its own physical form to occupy every possible avenue of escape. Before the crab even registers a threat, the trap is sealed. The octopus drops a webbing of muscular tissue, the skirt connecting its 8 arms, over the opening of crevice. It forms a living tent, blocking the exit. The crab's final, desperate lunge for freedom does not meet open water. It meets a wall of interlocking suction cups, each one acting as an independent, gripping vacuum. The prey is hauled backward into the dark, pulled toward a razor-sharp chitinous beak hidden at the center of the web. There is no frantic chase. There is no spectacular display of speed. The hunt ends with the cold, mathematical closure space. To comprehend how this creature operates, you must abandon everything you know about how a brain is supposed to work. In a vertebrate predator, a shark, a barracuda, a dolphin, intelligence is centralized. The brain sits in the skull, acting as a supreme commander, processing sensory data and sending unilateral orders down the spinal cord to the limbs. The limbs are dumb instruments, merely executing the brain's commands. The octopus is an alien departure from this blueprint. Its nervous system is profoundly distributed. While it does possess a centralized brain, one that is remarkably large and highly folded, capable of complex learning and memory, more than half of its 500 million neurons are not located in its head. They are spread throughout its 8 arms. Each arm is essentially a semi-autonomous thinking machine. An octopus's arm possesses its own localized neural circuitry, allowing it to process information, react to stimuli, and make basic decisions completely independent of the central brain. When the octopus is hunting, it does not need to micromanage its limbs. The central brain simply issues a broad command: search the reef. What follows is an exercise in biological parallel processing. As the octopus glides over the seabed, one arm might be threading itself deeply into a narrow coral tube, feeling for the rigid shell of a hidden mollusk. Simultaneously, a second arm is probing a sandy depression, while a third is anchoring the animal to the current, and a fourth is actively tasting the chemical signature of the water. Yes, tasting. The thousands of suction cups lining the arms are not just mechanical gripping tools. They are packed with tens of thousands of chemoreceptors. The octopus literally tastes everything it touches. As an arm slithers over a rock, it is tasting the algae, tasting the residual proteins of fish that brushed past an hour ago, tasting the microscopic fear pheromones of a hiding crab. If a severed octopus arm is presented with a piece of food, it will independently recognize it, grasp it, and attempt to pass it toward a mouth that is no longer there. This decentralized intelligence transforms the act of hunting into a multi-threaded problem-solving equation. If the octopus traps a fish under its web skirt and the fish darts to the left, the arm on the left instinctively tightens, reacting locally to the tactile pressure without needing to wait for a signal from the brain. The octopus does not need to see the chaotic struggle unfolding beneath its body. It feels the entire battle simultaneously across millions of nerve endings, continually recalibrating the geometry of the trap until the prey makes a fatal error. But this extraordinary neural architecture would be useless without the physical canvas it controls. The skin of the octopus is arguably the most sophisticated active camouflage system on planet Earth. Unlike mammals or birds, which must shed fur or feathers over seasons to change their appearance, the octopus can completely erase its visual identity in a fraction of a second. The mechanism is a masterpiece of cellular engineering. The skin is layered with millions of chromatophores, microscopic, elastic sacs filled with black, brown, red, and yellow pigments. By expanding and contracting the muscles around these sacs, the octopus can generate shifting, high-definition patterns across its body. But color alone cannot hide an animal in the highly textured, three-dimensional world of a coral reef. The true genius of the disguise lies in the papillae. These are specialized networks of muscle tissue that the octopus can force upward, physically altering the topography of its skin. In an instant, the smooth, hydrodynamically sleek body of the cephalopod can erupt into spikes, ridges, and fleshy fronds. It does not just change color to match a piece of coral. It actively sculpts its skin to replicate the exact physical texture of the calcified rock and the swaying algae. It becomes the background. It utilizes active background matching, adjusting its brightness and pattern to countershade itself against the ambient light filtering down from the surface. A predator could swim mere inches above an octopus resting on the seabed. looking directly at it, and register absolutely nothing but empty stone. This invisibility is not a luxury. It is an absolute, non-negotiable evolutionary requirement. Because the octopus is born with a fatal flaw, it has abandoned the ultimate defense mechanism of its ancestors. Millions of years ago, the cephalopod lineage included heavily armored creatures entirely encased in thick, protective shells. But the shell, while safe, is a prison. It restricts movement. It limits access to the narrowest, most resource-rich crevices of the ocean floor. To become the supreme infiltrator of the reef, the octopus made an evolutionary trade-off. It surrendered its armor. It has no bones. It has no external shell. Aside from a small, parrot-like beak at the center of its arms, the animal is composed entirely of soft, highly nutritious muscle. To a moray eel, a reef shark, or a grouper, the octopus is a walking, unprotected feast. The removal of physical armor is precisely what drove the hyper-evolution of its brain. When you cannot rely on a wall of bone to stop a set of jaws, you must rely on your intellect to ensure those jaws never find you in the first place. You must outthink the ocean. This cognitive superiority extends far beyond mere camouflage. The octopus is one of the very few marine animals that exhibits undeniable foresight. It plans for the future. In the sandy, barren expanses of certain coastal habitats, where natural cover is non-existent, octopuses have been observed doing something that defies the traditional understanding of invertebrate behavior. They locate discarded coconut shells or the empty, curved halves of lard clam shells. They do not merely hide under them. They excavate them, clean them, and then carry them across the open seafloor. Stacking the halves like bowls beneath their bodies, they awkwardly stilt walk across the vulnerable sand. They are carrying a portable fortress. When a predator appears, the octopus instantly drops to the sand, pulls the two halves of the coconut shell over its soft body, and seals itself inside a makeshift sphere of armor. It has recognized its own vulnerability, identified a tool in its environment, and manipulated that tool to construct a defense mechanism against a threat that had not yet materialized. It gathered the materials not out of immediate panic, but out of calculated anticipation. This same cold calculation is applied to the creatures it hunts. The octopus is not a brute force predator. When it captures a clam or a bivalve that is too heavily armored to pry apart with its arms alone, it does not waste valuable energy struggling in a futile tug of war. It transitions from a wrestler to a biological drill, using its radula, a rough, tongue-like organ covered in microscopic, chitinous teeth. It begins to systematically rasp away at the hardest part of the clam shell. But it does not just drill blindly. It targets the precise anatomical weak point of the bivalve, usually directly above the adductor muscle that holds the shell closed. As it drills, the octopus secretes a highly specialized, acidic saliva that dissolves the calcium carbonate of the shell, accelerating the breach. Once a tiny millimeter-wide hole is created, the octopus injects a paralyzing venom. The venom forces a clam's muscle to involuntarily relax. The impenetrable shell falls open on its own. Force was never the objective. Access was the objective, achieved through chemistry and surgical precision. And yet, despite its brilliance, despite its venom, its tools, and its perfect camouflage, the octopus is inevitably discovered. When a predator does break the illusion and lunges for the soft flesh, the octopus unleashes its final, most theatrical defense. It does not just flee, it leaves a ghost behind. From a specialized sac within its mantle, it ejects a dense cloud of ink. But this is not merely a smokescreen designed to muddy the water. The ink is mixed with mucus, giving it a thick, cohesive physical structure. It forms a pseudomorph, a dark, floating decoy roughly the same size and shape as the octopus itself. The ink also contains tyrosinase, a chemical compound that aggressively irritates and temporarily blinds the olfactory senses of the predator. As the shark or eel bites savagely into a phantom cloud of blinding, bitter ink, the octopus engages its biological jet engine. It draws a massive volume of water into its mantle cavity, seals the edges, and violently contracts its muscles, forcing the water out through a highly maneuverable, muscular funnel called a siphon. This jet propulsion rockets the octopus backward at blinding speed. In the span of a single second, the camouflage expert becomes a high-speed projectile, vanishing into blue gloom, while the predator chokes on a shadow. But the most haunting aspect of the octopus is not its camouflage, or its venom, or its distributed mind. It is its profound, uncompromising isolation. Dolphins pass down hunting techniques from mother to calf. Orcas have complex, generational cultures, teaching their young the architecture of the hunt over decades. The octopus is none of this. It is a solitary genius born into an empty world. Shortly after reproducing, both male and female octopuses die. The female will lay thousands of eggs in a hidden den, gently aerating them and defending them from scavengers until she starves to death. When the microscopic larvae hatch and drift out into the vast, unforgiving currents, they are entirely alone. There is no social network. There is no cultural transmission of knowledge. There is no mother to show them how to construct a coconut shelter, or where to drill into a clam, or how to shape their skin to match the coral. Every single octopus that survives to adulthood has had to figure out the entirety of the ocean's complexities by itself. It has had to invent its own camouflage techniques. It has had to deduce the physics of the water and the anatomy of its prey through trial, error, and raw, unfiltered observation. It is a brilliant, problem-solving mind that is born, learns the secrets of the universe, and dies, all within an incredibly brief span of 1 to 3 years. The sun drops below the horizon, and the vibrant colors of the coral reef begin to bleed out into the darkening blue. The diurnal fish retreat into their crevices, and the nocturnal predators begin to stir. The reef transforms into a labyrinth of shadows. A small, unwary fish drifts slightly too close to a shelf of rock. It does not notice the subtle irregularity in the texture of the stone. It does not see the eye, with its horizontal, rectangular pupil, evaluating the trajectory of its approach. The rock flexes. The illusion dissolves just long enough for the arms to extend, snapping outward with fluid, devastating precision. The fish is enveloped in the living web before its brain can even process the shift in the environment. The struggle is brief, muffled, and instantly concealed. Within seconds, the arms retract, the papillae rise, the chromatophores adjust to the fading light. The predator erases itself once more, blending seamlessly back into the silent, jagged face of the reef. It leaves no trace of the violence. It leaves no evidence of its presence. It rests in the dark, a solitary, alien intelligence, quietly solving the next equation. To survive in the shallow, sunlit labyrinth of a coral reef, a small fish must become an expert in threat assessment. The reef is a chaotic, three-dimensional metropolis of shifting light, waving anemones and endless visual noise. In this environment, the primary currency of survival is movement, a sudden darting shadow, the rapid flicker of a silvertail, the widening silhouette of an approaching predator. These are the kinetic cues that trigger the flight response. Small reef fish are hardwired to process velocity. They scan the water column for anything that moves with lethal intent. If it swims fast, you run faster. That is a fundamental rule of the ocean's arms race. But what happens when a predator completely removes movement from the equation? What happens when a hunter does not chase, does not intimidate, and does not even look like a living creature? You do not run from what you cannot perceive. And you cannot perceive the frogfish, because the frogfish is a masterclass in biological erasure. If you were to scan the rubble at the bottom of the reef, looking for a predator, your eyes would slide right past it. It defies every preconceived notion of what a fish should be. It has no sleek, streamlined body built for cutting through the water. It has no shimmering scales. It does not possess a powerful, forked tail. Instead, it looks like a biological mistake. It is a lumpy, asymmetrical, grotesque mound of flesh. Depending on the specific species and its chosen habitat, it might look exactly like a piece of dead, calcified coral. It might mimic a toxic, brightly colored sea sponge, complete with fake pores and dark indentations. It might resemble a clump of drifting, tangled algae. Its skin is not smooth. It is covered in fleshy protuberances, dermal flaps, and microscopic filaments that sway gently in the current, perfectly mimicking the organic debris of the seafloor. It does not just blend into the background, it becomes the background. But this camouflage is not a static trick. It is a dynamic, highly adaptable illusion. While it cannot change color in the blink of an eye like an octopus or a cuttlefish, many species of frogfish possess the extraordinary ability to alter their pigmentation over a period of days or weeks. If a yellow, sponge-mimicking frogfish is relocated to a patch of red coral and algae, its body will slowly undergo a chemical metamorphosis. The yellow pigments will recede, replaced by deep, mottled reds and purples, until the animal has seamlessly integrated into its new neighborhood. It is a slow-motion vanishing act, ensuring that the predator's disguise is always perfectly calibrated to its specific microhabitat. To maintain this flawless illusion, the frogfish must abandon the very thing that defines its kind. It almost never swims. Swimming would be an immediate betrayal. The rhythmic undulation of a fish's body generates pressure waves, disturbances in the water that the lateral lines of prey fish can easily detect. A swimming rock is an anomaly, and anomalies trigger panic. So, the frogfish has evolved a completely different method of locomotion. It walks. Its pectoral and pelvic fins have undergone a radical evolutionary modification. They have elongated and developed joint-like structures, resembling primitive, webbed hands and feet with functional elbows. When the frogfish needs to adjust its position, it does not paddle. It slowly, methodically grips the coral rubble, pulling itself forward 1 creeping millimeter at a time. It hauls its heavy body across the substrate with the deliberate, agonizing slowness of a stalking chameleon. This creeping gait generates virtually no turbulence. It creates no acoustic signature. It allows the frogfish to maneuver into the optimal strike zone, a narrow bottleneck between 2 coral heads or the edge of a small drop-off, without raising a single alarm on the reef. Once it finds the perfect vantage point, the frogfish stops. It settles its weight. It anchors its modified fins into the crevices of the rock, and then it simply powers down. It can remain in this exact position, completely motionless, for hours, even days. It enters a state of absolute predatory patience. Most predators in the ocean are slaves to their metabolism. A shark or a tuna must constantly move, constantly hunt, burning massive amounts of calories just to stay alive. The frogfish operates on an entirely different economic model. By remaining perfectly still, its metabolic rate drops to a whisper. It expends almost zero energy. It is not playing a game of pursuit. It is playing a game of probability. It knows that in the crowded, bustling ecosystem of the reef, if you wait in the right place long enough, food will eventually swim directly to you. But the frogfish is not a purely passive trap. It does not rely solely on blind luck. It actively manipulates the psychology of its prey. At the very front of its face, protruding from the top of its head just above its upper lip, is a highly specialized, modified dorsal fin spine. This spine acts as a flexible, biological fishing rod, known scientifically as elysium, and attached to the very tip of this rod is a true instrument of death, the esca. The esca is a fleshy lure, a customized piece of bait grown from the frogfish's own body. In some species, this lure looks exactly like a small plump shrimp, complete with tiny, fake eyes and antennae. In others, it resembles a wriggling polychaete worm or a tiny, struggling silver fish. One potential target, a juvenile wrasse, a damselfish, or a small snapper, drifts into the frogfish's visual field. The predator does not tense its body. It does not bare its teeth. It remains absolutely rigid, maintaining the illusion of dead rock. But the fishing rod comes alive. The frogfish begins to flick the elysium. The movement is incredibly precise, controlled by a complex network of tiny muscles at the base of the spine. The lure dances in the water column. It twitches, it spasms, it curls and uncurls. The frogfish does not move the lure with a smooth, mechanical rhythm. That would look artificial. Instead, it mimics the erratic, desperate thrashing of an injured animal. This is where the psychological manipulation reaches its peak. The small reef fish navigating the coral are constantly hungry. They are opportunistic grazers, always looking for an easy meal to fuel their own high-speed metabolisms. When they see the twitching lure, they do not see a predator. They see a victim. They see a struggling worm or a dying shrimp that has foolishly wandered out into the open. The frogfish is weaponizing the prey's own predatory instincts. It is using the victim's greed to override its caution. Drawn by the promise of effortless calories, the small fish breaks away from the safety of a school. It alters its trajectory, locking its eyes on the dancing lure. It approaches cautiously at first, its fins backpedaling slightly, assessing the situation. The frogfish adjusts its performance. It twitches the bait a little slower, making it look even weaker, even more helpless. The prey gains confidence. It inches closer, lining up its own jaws for the kill. It swims past the boundary of safety. It crosses into the execution zone. What happens next is widely considered to be the fastest feeding mechanism of any vertebrate on Earth. It is a biological explosion that defies the resistance of water. In a traditional hunt, a predator must open its mouth and lunge forward to bite its prey. But water is dense, 800 times denser than air. When a fish lunges forward, it pushes a massive bow wave of water ahead of it. That wave hits the prey first, acting as an early warning system, literally pushing the prey away before the teeth can connect. The frogfish bypasses this physical limitation entirely. It does not bite, it inhales. The skull of the frogfish is an intricate framework of hinged, interlocking bones. When the prey moves within a few centimeters of the lure, the frogfish triggers a catastrophic mechanical failure in the water column. In a fraction of a millisecond, speed so fast that they can only be captured by specialized high-speed cameras shooting thousands of frames per second. The frogfish drops its lower jaw and simultaneously expands its gill covers outward. This action violently expands the volume of its oral cavity, increasing by up to 12 times its original resting size. Physics demands that nature abhor vacuum. The sudden, massive increase in internal space creates an overwhelming pocket of negative pressure. A localized vortex forms instantly directly in front of the frogfish's face. The water does not push outward. It rips inward with terrifying velocity. The prey fish never even registers the rock opening. It does not see teeth. It does not feel a bite. One microsecond it is focusing intently on a wriggling worm, and the next microsecond, the water surrounding it collapses. The fish is caught in a hydraulic singularity. It is sucked forward, dragged entirely into the cavernous darkness of the frogfish's mouth before its brain can even fire a single electrical impulse to command its tail to flee. The jaw snaps shut with the sound of a hollow thud. The entire strike, from the initial opening of the mouth to the final sealing of the lips, takes roughly 6 milliseconds. To put that into perspective, it takes a human being nearly 400 milliseconds just to blink an eye. The frogfish could swallow its prey, close its mouth, and settle back into its camouflage 60 times over before you could blink once. Inside the dark, expanding prison of the buccal cavity, the prey is hopelessly trapped. The inner jaws and throat are lined with hundreds of backward-pointing, needle-like teeth. Any struggle, any attempt to swim forward and escape the crushing pressure of the throat muscles only drives a victim deeper into the teeth. And the horror of this trap is amplified by the frogfish's astonishing capacity for gluttony. Because its stomach is highly elastic and its mouth can expand so dramatically, a frogfish is not limited to eating tiny morsels. It is fully capable of inhaling prey that is virtually the same size as its own body. It can swallow a fish so large that its own stomach distends, stretching the skin of its abdomen until it drags against the seafloor. It is a predator that routinely swallows the impossible. Once the prey is secured and forced down into the digestive tract, the frogfish performs a final, chilling act of deception. It resets the stage. It does not swim away to digest its massive meal. Moving would break the camouflage. Instead, it remains exactly where it is. It exhales a pulse of water through its gills, settling the sand and debris around its fins. It folds the Elysium back against its head, hiding the fleshy lure from sight. It lowers its profile, letting its dermal flaps drift lazily in the current once more. Within seconds, the biological anomaly vanishes, replaced once again by an inert, unremarkable piece of algae-covered stone. The reef around it continues its frantic, chaotic rhythm. Schools of silver baitfish flash in the sunlight above. Crabs scuttle nervously from crevice to crevice. Juvenile predators dart through the branching corals, their eyes scanning desperately for the movement of their next meal or the looming shadow of their death. They swim right past the lumpy rock on the seafloor, completely oblivious of the fact that the rock is currently digesting one of their own. This is the ultimate triumph of the ambush. In an ecosystem defined by blinding speed, relentless pursuit, and the frantic expenditure of energy, the frogfish proves that you do not need to outrun your target to be an apex killer. You do not need to overpower the ocean. You simply need to understand the desires of your prey, construct a perfect, invisible lie, and wait for the precise moment when curiosity becomes suicide. The reef is a place of constant motion, but the most dangerous thing in the water is the one thing that refuses to move at all. The frogfish does not hunt. It simply opens a door to oblivion and lets the ocean swim inside. In the ocean, survival is almost entirely dictated by the processing of light. The visual cortex is the primary radar system of the sea. Small fish navigating the shallow coastal waters, the murky edges of mangrove forests, or the sun-drenched reef flats are constantly running a background program in their minds, analyzing the light for anomalies. They are looking for the shadow that breaks the pattern of the sand. They are looking for the dark silhouette of a grouper against the blue void. They are looking for the glint of a barracuda scale. If you can see the threat, you can calculate its trajectory. If you can calculate its trajectory, you can fire your muscles and execute an escape vector. Visibility is the foundational premise of the predator-prey contract. But there is a predator that has found a loophole in this contract. It has evolved to completely remove itself from the visual spectrum. Imagine a juvenile fish darting to the roots of a flooded mangrove forest. The water is calm, sheltered from the heavy surf of the open ocean. Sunlight filters down to the canopy of leaves above, creating a shifting, dappled mosaic of light and shadow on the muddy seafloor. The fish is hyper-alert. It checks its corners. It watches the dark spaces between the roots. The water ahead of it is perfectly clear. There is no shape. There is no shadow. There is no displacement of water, signaling an approaching mass. The ocean appears completely empty. The fish swims forward into the empty space, and in an instant, its world violently ends. There is no chase. There is no sudden snapping of jaws. The fish simply convulses. Its fins flare outward in a rigid, uncontrollable spasm. Its tail locks. The electrical signals traveling down its spinal cord are suddenly and catastrophically short-circuited. Within 3 seconds, the fish is entirely paralyzed, drifting downward like a falling leaf, entangled in a network of deadly threads that were never visible until it already killed. The box jellyfish does not hunt by pursuit. It does not overpower its prey with muscle. It hunts by weaponizing invisibility. To call the box jellyfish an animal almost feels like a miscategorization. It lacks almost every physiological hallmark we associate with a predator. It has no bones. It has no heart. It has no blood. It does not even possess a centralized brain. Its body, the bell, is a roughly cubic structure composed of mesoglea, a gelatinous substance that is 95% water. Because its tissue density perfectly matches the density of the surrounding ocean, it does not bend light in a way that creates a solid outline. It merely refracts it, bending the sunbeams ever so slightly, appearing not as a solid object, but as a subtle distortion in the water itself. It is a ghost made of fluid. Trailing from the four corners of this invisible bell are the tentacles. In some of the larger species, such as the sea wasp, these tentacles can extend up to 10 feet long. They are impossibly thin, resembling strands of spun glass, entirely transparent, and drifting silently in the currents. When the juvenile fish swims through the mangrove roots, it is not being chased into a trap. It is blindly swimming through a minefield that its eyes are physically incapable of registering. But the true horror of the box jellyfish lies not in its transparency, but in the microscopic violence that occurs at the exact moment of contact. A jellyfish tentacle is not a passive net. It is armed with millions of highly specialized, explosive cells called cnidocytes. Inside each of these cells sits a microscopic, tightly coiled structure known as a nematocyst. You can think of the nematocyst as a pressurized, spring-loaded harpoon sitting in a tiny bath of venom, waiting for a trigger. On the outside of the cell is a microscopic hair called a cnidocyl. This acts as a tripwire. But the jellyfish cannot afford to fire its weapons at floating debris or grains of sand, so the trigger requires two simultaneous inputs: physical friction and chemical recognition. When the fish brushes against a tentacle, the hair is bent, fulfilling the mechanical requirement. Simultaneously, chemoreceptors on the tentacle detect the specific amino acids present in the fish's mucus layer, fulfilling the chemical requirement. Once both locks are turned, the cell detonates. The speed of this biological explosion is almost incomprehensible. It is widely considered to be one of the fastest biomechanical processes in all of nature. The internal pressure of the cell spikes massively in a fraction of a microsecond. The tightly coiled harpoon is forced inside out, shooting outward with an acceleration of over 5 million G-forces. It bridges a microscopic gap and punches through the scales and skin of the fish in under 700 nanoseconds. To put that into perspective, the firing of a jellyfish harpoon is significantly faster than the speed of a bullet exiting the barrel of a gun. Once the hollow, barbed thread penetrates the flesh, the venom is injected directly into the prey's bloodstream. And this is where the box jellyfish separates itself from almost every other venomous creature on Earth. Many predators use venom to digest their prey from the inside out, or to cause enough pain to deter an attacker. The venom of the box jellyfish is designed for one hyperspecific purpose: absolute, immediate cardiovascular and neurological shutdown. The venom contains specialized proteins called porins. When these proteins enter the fish's bloodstream, they attach themselves to the red blood cells and physically punch holes in the cell membranes. The cells rupture, spilling massive amounts of potassium into the blood. The heart of a vertebrate relies on a highly delicate balance of sodium and potassium ions to maintain its electrical rhythm. When the jellyfish venom floods the system with excess potassium, that electrical gradient collapses instantly. The heart muscle violently spasms and then stops entirely. Simultaneously, neurotoxins block the calcium channels in the nervous system, freezing every motor function in the body. The fish does not struggle because the biological machinery required for struggling has been completely deactivated. There's a profound evolutionary reason for this extreme overkill toxicity. The box jellyfish must kill its prey instantly because it is trapped in a paradox of extreme fragility. If a spider catches a wasp in its web, the wasp will thrash violently, often tearing the web apart before the spider can subdue it. The box jellyfish cannot allow this. Its tentacles are delicate, and its gelatinous bell is highly susceptible to tearing. If a captured fish were allowed to thrash, kick its tail, and fight for its life, the sharp fins and frantic movements would easily shred the jellyfish's tentacles, severing connection and destroying the predator's feeding apparatus. Furthermore, the box jellyfish hunts in dynamic coastal environments, tidal channels, river mouths, and mangrove swamps, where water currents are constantly moving. If the venom took several minutes to take effect, the struggling fish would be swept away by the tide, dragging the jellyfish with it or tearing free completely. Therefore, the jellyfish cannot afford to fight. It cannot afford to struggle. The venom is an evolutionary insurance policy, guaranteeing that the moment the trap is sprung, all kinetic energy within the prey is immediately erased. The kill must be faster than the prey's ability to panic. Once the fish is paralyzed, the passive phase of the hunt ends, and the active consumption begins. The tentacles, previously trailing limp in the water, begin to contract. They shorten and thicken, hauling the immobilized prey upward toward the bell. The underside of the bell contains a muscular tube called the manubrium, which ends in the mouth. The tentacles deliver the fish directly to this opening, where it is slowly engulfed and digested by enzymes. The nutrients are then distributed throughout the animal's fluid-filled canals, providing the energy required to maintain its invisible patrol. But to view the box jellyfish merely as a drifting, toxic booby trap is to misunderstand the sophistication of its design. The greatest misconception about jellyfish is that they are entirely at the mercy of the ocean currents, aimlessly floating wherever the water pushes them. The box jellyfish is an active, directional swimmer. It pulses its cubic bell with a rhythmic, muscular contraction, expelling water from the bottom to generate forward thrust. It can swim at speeds of up to 4 knots, faster than many of the small fish it hunts. It intentionally patrols specific environments. It navigates. And to navigate, it uses a sensory system that challenges our fundamental understanding of how vision works. Spaced around the lower edge of its transparent bell are 4 sensory hubs known as ropalia. These structures hang down like tiny, weighted pendulums. Each ropalium contained a cluster of 6 eyes, giving the box jellyfish a total of 24 eyes. 4 of these eyes in each cluster are simple light-detecting pits, allowing the animal to sense the difference between day and night and to orient itself toward the surface. But the remaining 2 eyes in each cluster are astonishingly complex. They possess a cornea, a lens, and a retina, structures incredibly similar to the eyes of a human being or a vertebrate predator. These complex eyes are capable of forming actual, resolution-based images of their environment. One of these eyes always points upward, looking through the transparent body of the jellyfish to monitor the canopy of the mangrove trees or the surface of the water, ensuring the animal stays in the correct habitat. The other complex eye points downward and outward, scanning the immediate water column. Because the ropalia are weighted at the bottom, they always remain perfectly level with gravity, acting as an internal biological gyroscope, regardless of how the jellyfish's bell tilts or pulses as it swims. The box jellyfish uses these eyes to actively avoid obstacles. It can see the dark vertical pillars of mangrove roots and the sprawling structures of coral reefs. It actively steers around them to prevent its fragile bell and trailing tentacles from becoming snagged and torn. This presents a profound neurological paradox. The box jellyfish has 24 eyes. It sees shapes. It navigates its environment. It avoids obstacles. It actively swims. But it has no brain. There is no central processing unit to compile the images from those 24 lenses. There is no cerebral cortex to formulate a plan. Instead, the jellyfish operates on a distributed nerve net. The eyes are wired directly into a ring of nerve tissue that circles the base of the bell, which in turn wires directly into the swimming muscles. The sensory input skips the middleman of consciousness entirely. When the eye registers a dark shape ahead, the nerve net automatically alters the pulsing rhythm of the bell, steering the animal away. It is vision without a viewer. It is navigation without a navigator. It is a biological automaton executing a flawless, predatory algorithm. This lack of central brain makes the box jellyfish entirely immune to the psychological pressures of the hunt. A shark might hesitate if prey appears too large. An octopus might recalculate if an ambush point feels compromised. The box jellyfish feels nothing. It calculates nothing. It simply exists, patrolling the sunlit shallows with cold, mechanical persistence. As the sun sets and the light fades from the mangrove forest, the visual predators of the reef are severely handicapped. The jacks and the snappers lose their depth perception. They retreat to the safety of the crevices, unwilling to hunt in the dark. But for the box jellyfish, the absence of light changes nothing. Its transparency remains perfect. Its nerve net continues to pulse. It glides through the black water, trailing its invisible, venomous wires behind it, waiting for the ocean to push a mistake into its path. There is no malice in its movement. There is no hunger in the mammalian sense. There is only the silent, perpetual drifting of a phantom. In an ocean defined by teeth, speed, and muscle, the box jellyfish proves that the most absolute form of dominance is not to overpower the environment, but to simply become the water itself. The architecture of a coral reef is a monument to evasion. It is a sprawling, calcified metropolis built on the premise of the hiding place. For the millions of small fish that call this ecosystem home, survival is inextricably linked to proximity to the reef. When the shadow of a pelagic hunter, a shark, a tuna, or a giant trevally sweeps across the sunlit shallows, the defense protocol is immediate and universal. The small fish do not attempt to outswim the apex predators in the open blue. Instead, they dive, they plunge toward the seafloor, seeking the countless fractures, tunnels, and deep crevices carved into the living rock. The strategy is simple. Put a wall of impenetrable calcium carbonate between your soft flesh and the jaws of the enemy. In the open ocean, speed is currency. But down in the labyrinth of the reef, geometry is the ultimate shield. A predator cannot eat what it cannot reach, and a massive, broad-shouldered shark simply cannot fit into a gap barely wider than a human hand. So, the small fish darts into the darkness of the fissure. The walls of stone close in around it. The sweeping currents of the open water are instantly muffled. The threat of the pelagic hunter is neutralized. The fish believes it has found sanctuary. But sanctuary on the reef is a dangerous illusion. As the fish hovers in confined dark, attempting to catch its breath, the stone walls ahead of it begin to shift. The darkness is not empty. It is occupied, and before the prey can even attempt to throw its body into reverse, the trap springs. A set of jaws lined with backward curving, needle-like teeth erupts from the deepest part of the crevice. It happens with zero warning. There is no bow wave, no shadow, no displacement of water to trigger the prey's lateral line. The strike is impossibly fast, but it is not a strike designed for the open ocean. It does not aim to sever the spine or bite the prey in half. It aims merely to grip. The jaws clamp down with bone-crushing force. The fish instantly panics. It thrashes, its muscles firing in a desperate attempt to launch itself back out toward the sunlit entrance of the cave. But the predator does not chase it. The predator does the exact opposite. With the prey firmly locked in its teeth, the moray eel throws itself into reverse, sliding backward into the suffocating depths of the stone corridor, dragging its victim into a prison for which there is absolutely no escape. The moray eel is a predator that has fundamentally rejected the rules of traditional aquatic combat. It does not rely on burst speed. It does not rely on hydrodynamic efficiency. It has surrendered the open ocean entirely, choosing instead to become the undisputed master of claustrophobic nightmare. Look at the anatomy of the moray eel. It has abandoned almost every physical trait that defines a standard fish. It possesses no pectoral fins, no pelvic fins, no broad, fan-like tail for propulsion. Its body is an elongated, serpentine tube of pure, undulating muscle. Furthermore, it has completely shed its scales. Scales provide armor, but they also create friction when scraping against jagged rock. Instead, the moray is coated in a thick, highly specialized layer of protective mucus. This slime allows the eel to slip effortlessly through the tightest, most abrasive fissures of the coral without tearing its own skin. It is engineered for the deep interior of the labyrinth. While the rest of the ocean's hunters fight in 3 dimensions, the moray eel fights in a single, linear dimension, the tunnel. This is the genius of its strategy. By pulling the fight into a narrow crack, the moray eel strips the prey of its only evolutionary defense. A small reef fish survives by turning sharply, pivoting on a dime, and accelerating in unpredictable directions. But inside a coral tube that is exactly the width of its own body, agility is mathematically irrelevant. There is no room to pivot. There is no room to turn around. When the fish tries to beat its tail to generate forward thrust, its fins simply scrape uselessly against the stone walls. Worse still, the physics of the water itself turns against prey. In the open ocean, water gets pushed aside when a fish swims. Inside a narrow, sealed tube, the water has nowhere to go. It compresses. Every frantic thrash of the prey's body encounters immense hydraulic resistance. The fish exhausts itself almost immediately, fighting the rock and the water just as much as it is fighting the eel. But holding a violently thrashing fish inside a narrow hole presents a unique biological problem for predator. Most fish, like the grouper or the frogfish, swallow their prey by creating a massive vacuum. They open their enormous mouths, expand their throat cavities, and literally inhale the water and the victim in one swift motion. The moray eel cannot do this. To fit into the narrowest cracks of the reef, the moray had to evolve a skull that is incredibly sleek, narrow, and aerodynamic. Because its head is so narrow, it is physically incapable of expanding its mouth wide enough to create suction. If a moray eel were to simply bite a fish and try to swallow it normally, it would choke. The prey would become wedged in the front of its mouth, and the eel would have no mechanism to push it down its own throat. To solve this problem, evolution equipped the moray eel with a weapon that feels like it belongs in a science fiction horror film. Hidden deep inside the eel's throat, resting just behind the gills, is a secondary set of jaws. These are the pharyngeal jaws. They are not merely bony plates used for crushing, as found in some other fish. They are fully articulated, highly mobile, and armed with their own set of vicious, backward-pointing teeth. The sequence of the kill is a mechanical nightmare. The outer jaws of the moray eel, the ones visible on its face, strike first. They clamp onto the fish, securing it in place. The eel's grip is absolute. The backward curving teeth ensure that every time the prey struggles, it only pulls itself deeper onto the spikes. Then, the true horror begins. While the front jaws hold the prey immobilized, the pharyngeal jaws are deployed, powered by a complex sling of elongated muscles. The secondary set of jaws actually unhinges from the throat and lunges forward, traveling all the way up into the eel's mouth. They open wide, reach past the front teeth, and clamp down onto the body of the prey. Once they have a secure grip, the outer jaws momentarily relax their hold. The pharyngeal jaws then violently retract, pulling the fish backward deep into the esophagus. It is a ratcheting mechanism. The front jaws hold. The inner jaws reach, grab, and pull. The front jaws bite down again. The inner jaws reach, grab, and pull. The moray eel does not swallow its prey. It systematically drags its prey apart from the inside, pulling it down its throat inch by agonizing inch. The victim is mechanically hauled into the stomach while it is still completely alive, unable to move, unable to turn, wedged in the dark. But what happens when the prey is too large to simply pull down the throat? What happens when a moray eel manages to bite onto a massive octopus or a chunk of meat from a larger carcass that cannot be swallowed whole? In the open ocean, a shark would thrash its head violently from side to rip the flesh apart. A crocodile will perform a death roll, using its immense weight to twist the meat until it tears. The moray eel, confined to a narrow stone hallway, can do neither of these things. It cannot thrash and it cannot roll. Instead, it weaponizes its own serpentine body. When faced with oversized prey, the moray eel ties itself into a literal knot. It loops its tail around its own body, forming a tight muscular coil. It then begins to slide that knot upward, moving it from the tail up the torso and directly toward its own head. As the knot travels upward, it acts as a hydraulic press. The eel uses the rigid stone walls of its coral crevice to brace itself. It pushes the knot forcefully against the body of the prey, while simultaneously pulling its head backward. The sheer mechanical leverage generated by the knot pressing against a rock, combined with the pulling force of jaws, creates an immense tearing pressure. Flesh rips, bone snaps. The eel literally uses its own body as a fulcrum to rip the prey to pieces, utilizing the tight confines of its prison as the ultimate physical advantage. This terrifying proficiency in close-quarters combat is paired with a sensory system uniquely adapted to the dark. The moray eel has relatively poor eyesight. In the shadowed, complex depth of the reef interior, vision is often useless anyway. Instead, the eel is driven by an olfactory system of unparalleled sensitivity. Look closely at the snout of a moray, and you will see two small, tube-like structures protruding from the tip. These are the anterior nares, highly developed nostrils that constantly channel water across complex olfactory rosettes located inside the skull. The moray eel sees a reef through a three-dimensional map of chemical gradients. It can smell fear. When a fish is injured by a passing predator, it releases trace amounts of blood and stress hormones into the water. When a crab molts its shell, it releases a distinct chemical signature. The moray eel sits in its crevice, rhythmically opening and closing its mouth, not as a threat display, but to constantly pump water over its gills and through its olfactory tubes. It tastes the currents. When the sun sets and the visual predators of the reef go to sleep, the moray eel leaves its hole. It becomes a free-swimming phantom, undulating through the branching corals, tracking invisible ribbons of scent. It moves like a bloodhound, following the chemical trail of a sleeping parrotfish or a hidden octopus, slipping into the tightest cracks where the prey believes it is safe and extracting them in the dark. Yet, for all its solitary, terrifying master of the dark, the moray eel occasionally engages in a behavior that completely shatters our understanding of reptilian brain predators. It forms alliances. In certain reef ecosystems, moray eels have been observed hunting cooperatively with the coral grouper. This is not an accidental overlapping of territory. It is an intentional, coordinated, cross-species military operation. The grouper is a massive, powerful ambush predator. It dominates the open water above the reef. But when a small fish sees a grouper approaching, it immediately dives into coral crevices, hiding deep in the stone where the grouper's broad body cannot reach. The grouper, knowing the prey is out of reach, will swim to the hole of a sleeping moray eel. The grouper will literally signal the eel, performing a rapid, shimmying dance, shaking its head to wake the eel and indicate that there is food trapped nearby. The moray eel understands the signal. It emerges from its lair and follows the grouper to the crevice. The eel slithers deep into the narrow coral tube to flush the prey out. The trapped fish is presented with an impossible, unwinnable scenario. If it stays in the dark crack, The moray eel will tear apart with pharyngeal jaws. If it panics and bolts out a crack into the open water, the waiting grouper will instantly inhale it. The two predators have effectively divided the environment between them. The grouper commands the open space. The moray commands a confined space. Together, they eliminate every single variable of survival. Sometimes the eel gets the meal. Sometimes the grouper gets it. But the partnership guarantees that the prey has absolutely nowhere left to hide. The moray eel is a testament to the brutal ingenuity of evolution. It looked at the vast open ocean, a place of endless chases, blinding speed and high-stakes evasion, and rejected it completely. It understood that in a fair fight in the open water, the fastest animal wins. So, the moray eel decided to never fight fair. It withdrew into the stone. It narrowed its skull. It grew a second set of jaws inside its own throat. It learned to tie itself into a knot to tear flesh in the dark. It became the nightmare waiting at the end of the tunnel. The next time a small fish dives into a coral crevice, fleeing the shadow of a shark above, it may think it has escaped the violence of the ocean. It may think the stillness of the rock is a promise of safety, but the stillness is a trap. The moray eel does not need to outrun its prey. It just needs to wait in the one place where the prey has run out of room. In the grand, unforgiving theater of the ocean, the rules of survival are generally written in the language of hydrodynamics. If you are a small creature living in a world populated by massive, hungry jaws, you must adhere to a strict set of evolutionary mandates. You must be streamlined. You must possess explosive acceleration. You must be able to fold your fins flat against your body, ignite the powerful muscles of your tail, and vanish into the blue the absolute second a shadow falls across your path. Speed is the universal currency of life on the coral reef. If you observe the inhabitants of this ecosystem, they all conform to this rule. The snappers, the wrasses, the tiny silvery baitfish. They are all built like sleek biological torpedoes. They are nervous, twitchy, and perpetually ready to run. And then, drifting casually over a patch of exposed sand, you see an animal that seems to have completely ignored every single rule of oceanic survival. It is the pufferfish. And structurally speaking, it is an aerodynamic disaster. It is shaped like a blunt, rounded club. It has no sweeping, crescent-shaped tail to generate high-speed thrust. Its body is rigid, lacking the flexible musculature required for sudden, evasive darting. Instead of swimming with smooth, powerful undulations, it propels itself using a remarkably clumsy, hovering motion. Its tiny dorsal and pectoral fins flutter rapidly, almost comically, like the rotors of a straining helicopter. It moves with the slow, deliberate pace of a creature taking a leisurely stroll through a war zone. To a pelagic hunter, a reef shark patrolling the drop-off, or a massive, brooding grouper lurking in the shadows of a coral head, this animal does not just look like prey. It looks like a mistake. It is exposed. It is slow. It is soft. It appears to be a free meal practically begging to be eaten. The grouper watches from the dark. It calculates the distance. It registers a slow, awkward fluttering of the pufferfish's fins. The predator's brain runs the ancient algorithm of the hunt. The target cannot outswim me. The target cannot outmaneuver me. The target is entirely vulnerable. The grouper commits. It kicks its massive tail, launching itself out of the shadows. The water displaces heavily as the giant fish accelerates, its cavernous mouth beginning to unhinge, preparing to inhale the slow-moving anomaly in a single, violent rush. But the pufferfish does not attempt to flee. It does not try to outrun the giant. It knows that a foot race is mathematically impossible. Instead, in the critical fraction of a second before the grouper's jaws snap shut, the pufferfish plays its only card. It hits a biological panic button, and the prey suddenly, violently ceases to be prey. The transformation is instantaneous and spectacular. The pufferfish opens its mouth and begins to swallow water, but it does not swallow the way a normal fish swallows. It operates a specialized, high-capacity internal pumping mechanism. It gulps down the surrounding ocean with frantic mechanical efficiency, forcing massive volumes of water directly into its stomach. The stomach of the pufferfish is an evolutionary marvel of elasticity. In a normal fish, the stomach is a rigid organ with limited capacity. In the pufferfish, The stomach lining is constructed with deep, accordion-like pleats and folds. As the water floods in, these pleats rapidly unfold. The tissue stretches. The organ expands exponentially, pushing the other internal organs out of the way, stretching the highly elastic skin of the fish to an absurd extreme. Within a span of time measured in milliseconds, the small, rounded fish balloons outward. Its physical volume triples. It inflates into a perfectly taut, highly pressurized sphere. But the inflation is only the first phase of the magic trick. As the skin stretches to its absolute limit, the true nature of the pufferfish's armor is revealed. Buried flat beneath the surface of the skin are hundreds of modified dermal scales. In the animal's relaxed state, these scales are completely invisible, lying flush against the body to reduce drag while swimming. But as the skin expands and curves into a tight globe, the geometry of the surface changes. The pressure forces the base of these scales to pivot. Suddenly, hundreds of sharp, rigid spines snap to attention, standing perfectly erect across every square inch of the fish's body. The grouper, traveling at high speed with its mouth wide open, is suddenly confronted with a catastrophic shift in reality. The easy, bite-sized meal it targeted only a second ago is gone. In its place floats a bristling, spiked wrecking ball. The predator slams on the brakes. Its pectoral fins flare wildly, fighting its own forward momentum. It veers off at the very last possible instant, its jaws snapping shut on empty water, mere inches away from the wall of spikes. The grouper retreats, deeply confused, circling bizarre, floating sphere. This is the ultimate triumph of the pufferfish. It survives not by outrunning the enemy, but by completely rewriting the mathematics of the engagement. Predation is, at its core, an economic calculation. A hunter must weigh the caloric reward of a meal against the energy spent catching it, and more importantly, the physical risk of eating it. The primary limitation of almost every aquatic predator is its gape size, the maximum width it can open its mouth. If a prey item is larger than the gape, it cannot be swallowed by rapidly inflating. The pufferfish intentionally artificially inflates its own size, pushing itself instantly beyond the maximum gape capacity of the predator. It becomes physically unswallowable. But even if a shark or a massive grouper possess jaws large enough to encompass the inflated sphere, the secondary defense mechanism instantly alters the risk calculation. The erected spines are not just a visual deterrent. If a predator were foolish enough to bite down on an inflated pufferfish, those rigid spikes would instantly puncture the soft, sensitive tissues of the predator's gums, roof of the mouth, and throat. The fish would become hopelessly lodged in the airway, acting as a spiked cork. To swallow the pufferfish is to invite agonizing suffocation. The predator's brain processes this new, terrifying geometry. The risk is immense. The reward is impossible to access. The grouper turns away, abandoning the hunt completely, and slinks back into the shadows of the reef. The pufferfish has defeated a vastly superior physical specimen without throwing a single punch, without swimming a single inch, and without inflicting a single wound. It survived entirely through the psychological weaponization of its own anatomy. It forced the predator to experience doubt, and in the wild, doubt is the most effective shield ever invented. However, evolution is an arms race. What happens if a predator is desperate enough or large enough to ignore the spines? What happens if a massive tiger shark decides that the spikes are a minor inconvenience and crushes the inflated sphere between its serrated teeth anyway? If the mechanical defense fails, the pufferfish unleashes its ultimate, invisible weapon. A weapon so devastating that it ensures the predator will never make the same mistake again, because the predator will not survive the meal. Hidden deep within the tissues of the pufferfish, concentrated heavily in the liver, the ovaries, the intestines, and even seeping to the skin, is a chemical compound called tetrodotoxin, commonly known as TTX. Tetrodotoxin is one of the most lethal naturally occurring neurotoxins on the planet. It is exponentially more toxic than cyanide. It is not venom. Venom must be injected through a fong or stinger. Tetrodotoxin is a poison. It must be ingested. The pufferfish is essentially a swimming, spiked capsule of lethal chemistry. If a shark manages to crush the pufferfish and swallow the flesh, the TTX enters its digestive tract and rapidly absorbs into the bloodstream. The toxin is incredibly specific in its destructive capability. It targets the microscopic sodium channels that line the surface of nerve cells. Nerves communicate by passing electrical signals down their length. These electrical signals are generated by the rapid opening and closing of sodium channels. Tetrodotoxin acts like a microscopic cork, perfectly shaped to plug these channels. It binds tightly to the nerve cells, completely blocking the flow of sodium ions. The result is an immediate, catastrophic failure of the entire nervous system. The electrical signals from the brain simply stop. They cannot reach the muscles. The predator experiences rapid, ascending paralysis. Its fins stop moving. Its jaw goes slack. Most terrifyingly, the muscles that control respiration cease to function. The predator suffocates while completely conscious, its body paralyzed by the toxic payload it just consumed. The pufferfish may die in the jaws of the shark, but the shark will die moments later. It is a mutually assured destruction. But here's the most fascinating biological twist of the pufferfish's toxic arsenal. The fish does not manufacture this deadly poison itself. It does not have specialized organs dedicated to synthesizing tetrodotoxin. Instead, the pufferfish harvests it. The toxin is actually produced by specific strains of symbiotic bacteria that live in a marine environment. The pufferfish acquires these bacteria through its diet, grazing on small crustaceans, worms, and mollusks that harbor the toxic microbes. As the fish digests its food, it extracts the toxin and safely stores it within its own organs. Over time, it accumulates massive reserves of this lethal chemical, completely immune to its effects, effectively turning itself into a biohazard storage facility. This toxic accumulation serves a profound ecological purpose. It is a generational defense. When a predator eats a pufferfish and suffers agonizing illness or death, the surviving predators in the ecosystem witness the event. They learn. They associate the slow, fluttering swimming style and the blunt, rounded shape with agonizing consequences. The pufferfish does not just offend itself. It actively educates the entire reef. It teaches the apex hunters that some targets are simply off-limits. But magic tricks and chemical weapons always come with a biological cost. The inflation strategy is a masterpiece of deterrence, but it is not a state that the pufferfish can maintain indefinitely. It is an emergency protocol, and it places the animal in a highly vulnerable state. When a pufferfish is fully inflated, it is incredibly buoyant. It resembles a floating beach ball. Its tiny fins are rendered completely useless, unable to generate any meaningful propulsion against the massive, water-filled bulk of its own body. It loses all ability to steer. It loses all ability to navigate. If a strong ocean current catches an inflated pufferfish, the animal will be swept helplessly away from its territory, tumbling uncontrollably through the water column. Because of this vulnerability, the pufferfish will only inflate if absolutely necessary. And once the threat is passed, the fish faces a dangerous task of deflation. Slowly, carefully, it must relax its stomach muscles and expel the massive volume of water it just swallowed. It spits the water out in rhythmic pulses. As the stomach empties, the skin loses its tension. The spines fold back down, hiding themselves beneath the surface. The fish shrinks back to its normal, blunt shape. During this deflation period, the fish is exhausted. Its stomach muscles are fatigued, and its energy reserves are depleted. If the predator were to suddenly return during this window, the pufferfish might not have the stamina to inflate a second time. It is a high-stakes gamble, trading temporary invincibility for momentary exhaustion. Yet because its dual-layered defense system of spikes and neurotoxins is so overwhelmingly effective, it dictates the entire lifestyle of the animal. Consider the behavior of other small reef fish. Because they rely on speed and hiding, they live lives of constant paranoia. They stick close to shadows. They dart nervously from rock to rock. They are prisoners to their own vulnerability. The pufferfish, however, glides through the reef with an air of absolute, unbothered arrogance. It does not hide. It does not sprint. It operates in broad daylight, drifting casually over the exposed sand flats and the open coral heads. It knows that it is untouchable. This freedom allows the pufferfish to exploit a very specific ecological niche. Because it doesn't need to dedicate its energy to fleeing, it can dedicate its energy to eating the things that other fish find too difficult to crack. Look closely at the face of the pufferfish. It does not have normal individual teeth. Over millions of years of evolution, Its teeth have fused together to form a solid, incredibly powerful beak, remarkably similar to the beak of a parrot. The jaw muscles driving this beak are massive and disproportionately strong, while other fish are chasing fast-moving shrimp or picking tiny parasites off the reef. The pufferfish is hunting tanks. It targets heavily armored prey, crabs, sea urchins, and thick-shell marine snails. It hovers over a crab, ignoring the defensive snapping of its pincers. It casually aligns its beak with the hardest part of the crab's carapace and bites down. The beak acts like an industrial bolt cutter. The shell shatters with an audible crunch. The pufferfish grinds a calcium carbonated dust and extracts the soft meat inside. It is a bizarre, beautiful juxtaposition. This slow, seemingly clumsy, almost cartoonish-looking fish is actually a heavily armed, toxic crushing machine. It roams the reef like a tiny, armored tank, dismantling the hardest creatures in the ocean, completely immune to the terrors that dictate the lives of everything else around it. As the sun begins to set over the coral, casting long, deep shadows across the seafloor, the predators of twilight shift into gear. The water grows colder, and the tempo of the reef accelerates. A young pufferfish drifts slowly along the edge of a coral drop-off, casually inspecting a crevice for hiding snails. From the deep blue below, a silhouette rises, a fast-moving hunter, perhaps a young jack or an inexperienced reef shark, locks its eyes on the slow-moving shape. It accelerates, rushing upward to claim an easy kill. The pufferfish senses a displacement of water. It stops chewing. It inhales deeply. In a fraction of a second, the soft, blunt fish vanishes, replaced by a rigid, spiked globe floating defiantly in the darkening water. The hunter halts its charge, drifting to a confused, frustrated stop just inches from the spears. It stares at the impossible object for a long moment, the ancient calculus of survival overriding its hunger. The hunter turns away, sinking back down into the deep blue. The pufferfish waits. The ocean quiets down. Slowly, it begins to expel the water from its stomach. The spikes fold away. The globe shrinks back into a fish. It shakes its tail gently, reorients itself toward the coral, and goes back to looking for snails. It did not fight. It did not run. In an ocean governed by the relentless pursuit of speed, the pufferfish survives by simply daring the world to take a bite. The water is shallow, barely deep enough to cover the dorsal fin. In the coastal estuaries and tidal flats, the seafloor is a vast, featureless expanse of fine silt and mud. Small fish, mullet, and pinfish graze lazily in the warm shallows. The water is murky, visibility limited to just a few feet. For a small fish, this turbidity is usually a comfort. It provides cover. It hides them from the eyes of the seabirds above and the cruising predators in the deeper channels. But the predator that is approaching does not need to see them to kill them. It does not plan to chase them through the gloom. It plans to use the gloom itself as a weapon. A single bottlenose dolphin glides into the shallows. It does not rush. It does not charge into the school of mullet with jaws snapping. Instead, it sinks toward the seafloor and begins to swim in a slow, perfectly calculated circle. As it moves, its powerful tail beats downward, intentionally striking the soft mud at the bottom. With every powerful downstroke, a thick, billowing cloud of sediment erupts into the water column. The dolphin continues its rotation, swimming in a tightening spiral, tracing a perfect geometric ring of choking silt around the feeding fish. Inside the circle, panic begins to bloom. The water is rapidly turning from murky to completely opaque. The fine sediment clogs the gills of the mullet. Their lateral lines, designed to detect subtle pressure changes, are overwhelmed by the chaotic turbulence of the mud wall closing around them. Their primary instinct, the deeply ingrained software of evasion, tells them that they are surrounded. The mud feels like a solid barrier. They are being compressed, suffocated, and trapped. And so, the fish execute the only escape vector that seems viable. They look up. The surface of the water above them is clear. It is oxygen. It is freedom. One by one, acting on pure, desperate instinct, the fish launch themselves out of water, vaulting over the wall of the mud ring into the open air. But as they break the surface, they do not land in open water. They land directly in the open mouths of the waiting pod. While the single dolphin was busy carving the trap in the mud, The rest of the pod have positioned themselves precisely around the outside perimeter of the ring. They are treading water, their heads raised above the surface, mouths open, waiting for Sky to literally rain food. The fish are not escaping. They are launching themselves directly down the throats of their executioners. This is not opportunistic feeding. It is not a frantic, high-speed chase. It is environmental engineering. The mud ring hunt reveals a terrifying depth of cognitive processing. The dolphins did not just react to the presence of fish. They understood the physical properties of the sediment. They understood the geometry required to enclose a space. But most chillingly, they possess a predictive understanding of the prey's psychology. The dolphins knew, before they even began to spin, exactly how the fish would react to the claustrophobia of the mud. They did not build a physical wall. They built a psychological one. They manipulated the prey's own survival reflex, turning the instinct to flee into the mechanism of their death. The predator did not catch the prey. The predator convinced the prey to catch itself. But this mastery of the environment is not limited to shallow mud flats. When dolphins move into the vast, featureless expanses of the open ocean, where there is no sediment to manipulate and nowhere to corner a fleeing school of fish, they simply change their architecture. They replace the mud with speed, and they replace the physical barrier with sound. Imagine a massive school of mackerel shimmering in the pelagic blue. As we saw with the barracuda, a school is a fortress of confusion, a unified superorganism that relies on synchronized movement to evade capture. To break it, you must dismantle its geometry. When a pod of oceanic dolphins approaches a bait school, they do not attack randomly. They attack as a highly disciplined military unit. They approach from multiple vectors simultaneously. They swim in coordinated, sweeping arcs, diving beneath the school and circling the perimeter. Their movements are not designed to catch fish, not yet. Their movements are designed to compress space. With every pass, the dolphins tighten the circle. They force the mackerel upward toward the surface, pinning them against the ceiling of the ocean. The school, which was once a loose, fluid cloud, is violently condensed into a tight, swirling sphere known as a bait ball. The pressure inside the bait ball is immense. The mackerel are packed so tightly that they begin to collide. The oxygen in the center of the sphere is rapidly depleted. The fortress of confusion has been turned into a localized prison. Now, the true assault begins. The dolphins take turns charging directly through the center of the condensed mass. But they are not just biting blindly. As they penetrate the bait ball, they snap their bodies sideways, delivering devastating, whip-like strikes with their powerful flukes. The sheer concussive force of these tail slaps sends shockwaves through the dense water, physically stunning dozens of fish at a time. The stunned mackerel drift helplessly out of the spinning mass, easy pickings for the dolphins patrolling the perimeter. The roles within the pod are fluid and constantly shifting. A dolphin that just completed a high-speed penetration run will peel off and take up position on the outer wall, ensuring the bait ball does not expand, while a fresh dolphin dives into the center to deliver another concussive strike. It is a rotating, relentless machine of muscle and hydrodynamics. Yet, the most extraordinary aspect of this open ocean siege is completely invisible to the human eye. It is the acoustic warfare. The ocean is a dark, visually limited environment, but sound travels through water almost 5 times faster than it does through air. Dolphins have evolved to perceive the world through echolocation, an organic sonar system of unimaginable precision. They emit rapid bursts of high-frequency clicks from a specialized organ in their foreheads called the melon. These sound waves travel out into the water, bounce off objects, and return to the dolphin's lower jaw, which acts as a highly sensitive acoustic antenna, channeling the vibrations directly to the inner ear. During the chaos of a bait ball hunt, the dolphins are not just clicking to find the fish. They are using their sonar to map the entire battlefield in real time. The clicks penetrate the dense mass of the bait ball, allowing the dolphins to see the internal structure of the school, identifying areas of weakness or high density. Furthermore, they are communicating. Amidst the clicks are complex whistles, burst pulses, and squeaks. They are coordinating their movements, signaling rotation shifts, and maintaining the integrity of their formation even when visibility drops to zero in a cloud of scales and bubbles. Their sonar does not just locate prey, it maps the exact position of every other pod member. preventing high-speed collisions in the chaotic frenzy. They are weaving a net, but the net is made entirely of sound. But perhaps the most profound revelation of dolphin intelligence is not found in their cooperative group dynamics, but in the solitary actions of a highly specialized few. Travel to the shallow, seagrass-covered channels of Shark Bay, Australia. Here, the ocean floor is littered with sharp shells, abrasive coral rubble, and venomous creatures hiding in the sand. For a dolphin trying to probe the seabed for buried fish, foraging is a dangerous, painful endeavor. The delicate skin of their rostrum, their snout, is easily sliced open by the jagged terrain. But a specific subset of female bottlenose dolphins in Shark Bay has solved this problem. They have invented a technology. Before they begin a hunt, these dolphins will swim to the seabed and carefully snap off a piece of basket sponge. They carry this conical, rubbery sponge back to their foraging grounds, and they fit it perfectly over their rostrums, wearing it like a protective glove. With the sponge securely in place, the dolphin can aggressively plunge its snout deep into the sharp coral rubble, routing out hidden fish without suffering a single scratch. The sponge absorbs the abrasion. It protects against the stings of venomous stonefish. The dolphin has identified a physical limitation of its own anatomy, identified material in its environment, and combined the two to construct a functional tool. This behavior, known as sponging, shatters the boundary between human and animal intelligence. But the truly chilling reality of sponging is how it is acquired. It is not instinctual. A dolphin is not born knowing how to use a sponge. It is not coded into their DNA. It is culturally transmitted. Young calves spend years shadowing their mothers, watching them select the correct type of sponge, watching them fit it to their faces, and watching them forage. The calves learn through pure observation and imitation. Only certain family lineages practice this behavior. It is a localized tradition, a piece of inherited, intellectual property passed down through generations. But tool use comes with profound strategic trade-off. Dolphins that use sponges spend significantly more time foraging alone, diving deeper and working harder than the dolphins that hunt cooperatively in large pods. They sacrifice the safety and efficiency of the group for the specialized, high-calorie rewards of the deep rubble. The pod is not a monolith of identical machines. It is a society containing distinct cultures, specialists, and varying methodologies. This capacity for calculated manipulation extends even further. Dolphins understand the biological alarms of their prey. When certain species of schooling fish are attacked, they release a chemical distress cue into the water, a pheromone designed to warn the rest of the school. Dolphins have been observed deliberately exploiting the system. During the initial stages of corralling a school, a dolphin might intentionally injure a single fish and let it go. As the bleeding, panicked fish swims frantically back into the center of the school, it broadcasts its distress chemicals. The panic goes viral. The entire school, terrified by the chemical alarm of their wounded neighbor, condenses into a tight-bait ball much faster than they would have through physical corralling alone. The dolphins did not just force a compression. They induced a psychological cascade. They hacked the prey's internal warning system to accelerate their own hunt. Even in the muddy shallows, their tactics continue to evolve. Beyond the circular mud rings, some populations have been observed utilizing cooperative mud plumes. Instead of circles, multiple dolphins will swim side by side, violently kicking up parallel walls of sediment. They create a moving, opaque corridor, a hallway of blindness that funnels the fleeing fish directly towards shallow sandbar or a dead-end cove. They are not merely enclosing space. They are actively directing the flow of life across the terrain. Biologically, this terrifying level of orchestration is powered by an encephalization quotient that rivals our own. Their brains are massive relative to their body size, characterized by a deeply folded neocortex. This extensive neural folding provides a massive surface area required for high-level social processing, emotional intelligence, and, crucially, predictive modeling. They do not just react to the ocean. They run simulations of it in their minds. Because of this, different dolphin populations around the world possess entirely different hunting repertoires. In the tidal creeks of South Carolina, dolphins engage in strand feeding. They work together to herd a wave of mullet directly onto the muddy riverbank. The dolphins then intentionally beach themselves, sliding out of the water and onto mud to snap up the stranded fish, before thrashing their way back into the water. In parts of Brazil, Dolphins have formed multi-generational partnerships with human fishermen, actively herding schools of fish toward the humans' nets, and then slapping the water to signal exactly when the men should cast. These are not universal dolphin behaviors. They are localized geographical cultures. They innovate within the constraints of their specific habitats, and their orchestration is not reserved exclusively for prey. Dolphins also coordinate against their competitors. In ecosystems where large apex sharks patrol the same feeding grounds, a solitary dolphin is vulnerable, but dolphins are rarely solitary. When a large shark approaches a feeding zone, the pod does not scatter in fear. They form a unified front. By swimming in tight, aggressive formations and unleashing coordinated barrages of acoustic bursts and physical body slaps against the water, they present an overwhelming wall of intimidation. They harass, dive bomb, and relentlessly annoy the shark until the larger predator simply gives up and leaves the territory. It is not a fight for a single meal. It is a calculated campaign for territorial dominance. This presents the ultimate paradox of the dolphin. In the human imagination, they are the ocean's gentle acrobats. They ride the bow wakes of our ships. They display synchronized leaps that look like pure joy. They possess a permanent biological smile carved into their jawlines. But beneath that charismatic veneer lies an apex predator capable of cold, orchestrated control. The same immense intelligence that fosters their deep social bonds, their playfulness, and their complex communication also facilitates their lethal design. The hunt is never fueled by a chaotic frenzy. It is guided by absolute mathematical anticipation. Every mud ring, every acoustic wall, every sponge-assisted probe reflect a mind that is constantly calculating the physics of water flow, the panic reflex of fish, and the exact energy expenditure required for kill. They shift roles without a visible command. They communicate strategies in the dark. As the mud from the ring slowly settles back to the seafloor, the water clears. The surface of the estuary is smooth once more. The dolphins regroup, their bodies gliding through shallows in loose, relaxed formation. They break the surface in slow, synchronized breaths, the mist of their exhalations hanging briefly in the warm coastal air. There is no visible trace of the architecture they built just moments earlier. There are no walls left behind, no nets, no tools, only the memory of a perfect trap that existed briefly in motion. They did not overpower the fish by strength alone. They designed the moment, and in that design lies the true, chilling depth of their power. The seafloor of Southeast Asia, specifically the volcanic estuaries and silted bays of Indonesia and Malaysia, is a brutal landscape for a soft-bodied animal. Unlike the complex three-dimensional cathedrals of a coral reef, where a creature can vanish into 1,000 different crevices, the benthic mudflats are vast, exposed, and entirely unforgiving. There is no architecture here. There is no stone to wedge yourself behind. There are no branching corals to break the line of sight. It is a barren, sweeping desert-fine, dark silt. If you are a predator navigating the space, you have a distinct advantage. There are no obstacles to block your vision or your velocity. If you are prey, you have only two options. You must be able to bury yourself instantly, or you must be able to outrun whatever is looking at you. And yet, crawling slowly across this open, defenseless expanse is a creature entirely made of protein and muscle. It has no shell. It has no venomous spines. It cannot swim fast enough to outpace a barracuda or a snapper. By every law of evolutionary logic, this animal should not survive a single day in the open. But as a shadow descends from the water column above, the octopus does not panic. It does not attempt to dig. It does not release a cloud of ink and attempt a desperate, jet-propelled retreat. Instead, it stops in the middle of the exposed mud. It pulls its 8 arms in close to its mantle, shifting its body weight. And in the span of 3 seconds, the octopus ceases to exist. The predator, a large, aggressive reef fish, closes in, its jaws preparing to snap the soft cephalopod in half. But the visual information reaching the predator's brain suddenly contradicts the reality of the hunt. The soft, brown lump on the seafloor is gone. In its place, hovering just above the silt, is an animal with wide, flared fins, decorated in stark, alternating bands of highly contrasting cream and rust. Dozens of long, rigid spines seem to radiate from its back, waving menacingly in the current. The predator slams on its biological brakes. Its pectoral fins flare, throwing it into a harsh, sideways skid. It recognizes its new shape. It recognizes the bold, high-contrast striping. It is looking at a lionfish, and the predator knows, through millions of years of hardwired genetic memory, that a lionfish is a walking armory of agonizing neurotoxic venom. To bite a lionfish is to invite a mouthful of needles that will inflict excruciating pain and potential death. The predator's hunger is instantly overridden by absolute terror. It turns its body sharply and powers away into the gloom, abandoning the hunt completely. Down on the mud, the shape holds its posture for a few moments longer. Then the rigid spines droop. The flared fins melt back into soft, pliable muscle. The high-contrast stripes dissolve back into the mottled brown to silt. The mimic octopus resumes its slow crawl. It did not fight. It did not hide. It simply stole the identity of a killer and used the predator's own fear as a shield. The mimic octopus represents a cognitive leap in evolutionary defense that borders on science fiction. Many animals in the ocean utilize camouflage. They possess the ability to change their color and texture to perfectly match a rock, a piece of kelp, or a patch of sand. That is background matching. It is the art of becoming invisible. But the mimic octopus does not practice background matching. It practices dynamic, behavioral impersonation. It does not want to be invisible. When threatened, it actively wants to be seen. But it wants to be seen as something far more dangerous than the predator that is looking at it. To achieve this, the octopus relies on a level of physical control that is unparalleled in the animal kingdom. Its 8 arms are muscular hydrostats, capable of infinite flexibility and rigidity. Its skin is a high-resolution display of chromatophores, iridophores, and leucophores. But having the equipment is only half the equation. The true weapon is the software running in the animal's massive, highly distributed brain. To impersonate a lionfish, the octopus cannot merely change its color. It must fundamentally alter its anatomy. It manipulates the muscles in its arms to flatten them out, making them look like broad, sweeping fins. It extends the tips of its arms outward and holds them perfectly rigid, simulating the venomous dorsal spines of the toxic fish. It then alters its buoyancy, lifting itself off the seafloor to hover in the water column, perfectly replicating the slow, arrogant drift of a real lionfish. It is not just a costume. It is a full theatrical performance, complete with method acting. But a single disguise is not enough. The ocean is populated by a vast array of predators, and different predators fear different things. A disguise that works on a snapper might not work on a shark. A disguise that frightens a grouper might actually attract a different kind of hunter. The mimic octopus understands this. It does not possess a static defense. It possesses a wardrobe of nightmares. Imagine a different scenario. The octopus is moving across a patch of sand when a large, highly aggressive damselfish approaches. Damselfish are territorial and fiercely attack intruders. A lionfish impersonation might not be effective here, because damselfish are known to aggressively mob and harass lionfish. The octopus evaluates the specific threat, and its brain selects a different file from its behavioral database. It drops to the seafloor. It rapidly digs 6 of its arms deep into a hollow in the mud, completely burying them. It leaves only 2 arms exposed, stretching them out in opposite directions along the sand. The skin on those 2 exposed arms instantly flushes with stark, alternating bands of pure black and brilliant white. Then the octopus begins to move the arms. But it does not move them like an octopus. It moves them with a fluid, rhythmic, undulating wave. To the approaching damselfish, the octopus has vanished. In its place, a highly venomous banded sea snake is slithering across the sand. The banded sea snake carries a venom so potent that a single drop could kill dozens of adult humans. It is one of the most universally feared creatures in the shallow seas. The damselfish, despite its territorial rage, recognizes the black and white bands of death. It recognizes the serpentine undulation. It immediately ceases its attack and flees. The mimic octopus has successfully hacked the visual processing center of a completely different predator, using a completely different disguise, selected specifically for that exact encounter. This is contextual intelligence. The octopus must identify the species of the predator, recall which toxic animal that specific predator fears most, and then instantly contort its own boneless body into precise physical shape and behavioral pattern of that toxic model. And the repertoire continues to expand. If the octopus needs to move quickly across the open sand without drawing attention from the water column above, it will pull all 8 of its arms tightly backward, forming a sleek, teardrop shape. It flattens its mantle down against the seabed. It shifts its color to a pale, sandy brown. And then it undulates the edges of its arms rapidly, gliding over the silt with continuous, rippling motion. It has become a flatfish. Specifically, it often mimics the peacock flounder or the toxic sole, both of which are common in these waters. By impersonating a flatfish, the octopus can move at high speeds across the exposed terrain without triggering the predatory response of sharks or rays, which generally ignore these toxic or difficult-to-catch bottom dwellers. It has been documented mimicking giant stingrays, jellyfish, mantis shrimp, and even toxic anemones. It is an animal with no fixed identity. It is whatever it needs to be to survive the next 10 seconds. But why did evolution drive the mimic octopus down this path? Why not just evolve a thick shell or develop actual, potent venom like the blue-ringed octopus? The answer lies in the brutal, uncompromising economics of biology. Everything an animal does, everything an animal builds within its own body, costs energy. Growing a thick, calcified shell requires a massive, constant intake of calcium and minerals. It makes the animal heavy. It restricts mobility. It prevents the animal from accessing the narrow, nutrient-rich crevices of the reef. Developing and maintaining a highly potent venom system is equally expensive. The proteins required to synthesize neurotoxins are metabolically costly. Venom glands take up valuable real estate inside the body, and once venom is deployed, it takes time and energy to manufacture more, leaving the animal temporarily vulnerable. The mimic octopus bypassed these massive energetic costs entirely by engaging in evolutionary theft. It is a biological parasite of perception. Rather than spending millions of years and billions of calories developing its own venom, the mimic octopus simply exploits the venom that other animals have already paid for. The lionfish paid the metabolic price to synthesize its toxins. The banded sea snake paid the price for its deadly bite. The predators of the ocean learned, through generations of painful, lethal trial and error, to respect those investments. The mimic octopus steps into the ecosystem and casually borrows the reputation of those animals without spending a single calorie on actual weaponry. It uses the massive processing power of its brain to counterfeit the threat. It is the ultimate bluff. But this strategy, brilliant as it is, carries a terrifying, inherent fragility. For the mimic octopus to survive, the lie must be absolute. The disguise must be perfect. Because if a predator decides to call the bluff, if a starving shark or a particularly aggressive grouper decides to test a lionfish or bite the sea snake, the illusion collapses catastrophically. The mimic octopus has no backup plan. It has no actual venom in its spines, because it has no spines. It has no toxic bite to defend itself. If the predator strikes, the octopus is nothing more than a soft, defenseless package of protein. It will be torn apart in seconds. Therefore, the survival of the mimic octopus is deeply intertwined with the delicate balance of the ecosystem it inhabits. The strategy only works if the genuine, highly toxic models, the real lionfish, the real sea snakes, are present and abundant in the same waters. If you were to remove the sea snakes from the bay, the predators would eventually forget to fear the black and white bands. The evolutionary memory would fade, and the moment the predators forget to fear, the mimic octopus's disguise becomes useless. The octopus relies entirely on the genuine danger posed by other species to validate its own existence. It needs the monsters of the reef to be real, so that it can safely pretend to be one of them. This creates a fascinating, invisible web of ecological dependence. The mimic octopus does not dominate its environment by shaping it or destroying it. It survives by perfectly reading the sociological and psychological landscape of the reef and inserting itself into the narrative as a terrifying fiction. And this mastery of deception is not used purely for defense. The mimic octopus, like all cephalopods, is a voracious, highly calculated hunter, and it uses its theatrical abilities to execute some of the most insidious ambushes in the shallow seas. When stalking highly alert, fast-moving prey, like a small, nervous crab or a skittish goby. The octopus cannot simply crawl toward it. Even without a shell, the visual profile of an octopus is distinctly predatory. The crab would flee instantly. So, the octopus changes the script. It flattens its body, pulls its arms back, and assumes the shape of a harmless, drifting flatfish. A crab does not fear a flatfish. A flatfish eats tiny worms, not armored crustaceans. The octopus, locked into the posture of the flatfish, glides slowly, almost lazily, across the sand. It does not look directly at the crab. It maintains the illusion of an uninterested, benthic grazer just wandering to the neighborhood. It drifts closer. The crab watches it pass, its defensive posture relaxed, completely unconcerned by the harmless shape drifting into its personal space. The octopus closes the final few inches. The prey is perfectly within range. The illusion shatters. In a fraction of a second, the flatfish explodes outward. The sleek, streamlined shape vanishes as 8 muscular, suction-lined arms erupt from the sand, expanding like a biological net. The crab has no time to raise its claws. It has no time to register the transformation. It is enveloped, dragged into the dark center of the web, and crushed by the hidden beak. The trap was not a physical snare. It was a psychological Trojan horse. The octopus gained proximity by convincing the prey that it was innocent, and then weaponized that proximity with lethal precision. As the tide begins to recede, pulling the water away from the silted flats, the landscape becomes even more exposed. The shadows stretch long across the barren mud. A lone mimic octopus crawls over a small depression in the sand. In the distance, the silhouette of a large stingray glides into view, a massive, cruising vacuum cleaner of the seafloor. The stingray eats mollusks, crabs, and small, soft-bodied creatures hidden in the sand. An octopus is a perfect meal. The ray turns, its electrical sensors locking onto the faint biological hum of the cephalopod. It accelerates, its massive wings rippling through the murky water. The octopus does not run. It stops. It calculates. It raises its body high on its 8 arms, making itself look as large as possible. It flares the webbing between its limbs. Its skin flashes into a brilliant, chaotic pattern of high-contrast spots and bands. It begins to undulate, lifting 2 arms high above its head, curving them aggressively backward like the striking claws of a massive, heavily armored mantis shrimp. The stingray, a creature used to encountering things that cower or flee, is suddenly confronted by a violent, aggressive anomaly. The shape is wrong. The colors scream danger. The posture promises a fight. The ray breaks its glide. It lifts its nose, sweeping over the top of the octopus with a foot of clearance, deciding that whatever this bizarre, aggressively posturing creature is, it is not worth the risk of a punctured underbelly. The ray continues its patrol, vanishing into the gloom. The octopus holds a terrifying pose until the water settles. Then, slowly, the mantis shrimp claws uncurl. The high-contrast spots fade into the dull, mottled brown of surrounding earth. The body lowers, melting back into the silt. The ocean is a theater of absolute honesty, where speed, strength, and venom are the only undeniable truths. But the mimic octopus survives by being the ultimate liar. It does not fight the rules of the sea. It simply convinces the world that it is something else and lets the ocean's own fears do the heavy lifting. The coral reef is a biological frantic zone. It is a city of constant, high-strung paranoia. If you are a small fish navigating this neon metropolis, your life is governed by a single, unyielding neurological trigger: velocity. Your brain is wired to an ancient alarm system. If a shadow moves fast, if water displaces violently, if a shape accelerates toward you, your moth nerve cells fire. These are specialized neurons designed to bypass conscious thought, sending an instant, explosive command directly to your tail muscles. You do not look to see what is coming. You simply detonate into a blur of motion and vanish into the nearest crevice. To survive the reef, you must respect the speed of your enemies. But what happens when the enemy refuses to run? What happens when the predator does not trigger the velocity alarm? A shape drifts down from the upper water column. It does not slash through the water like a barracuda. It does not power forward like a grouper. It descends with the slow, mesmerizing grace of a falling leaf. To the small damselfish and wrasses grazing on the algae below, this arriving presence does not compute as a threat. It looks completely ornamental. Its body is draped in flowing, translucent ribbons of flesh. Broad, feather-like fins extend outward in an elegant, sweeping fan. It is painted in bold, hypnotic bands of deep rust mahogany and bright cream. It moves so slowly, with such delicate, deliberate micro-adjustments, that it seems to be merely drifting on the current. It does not look like a killer. It looks like a piece of living, floating architecture, and that is the deadliest illusion on the reef. The lionfish does not hunt by chasing its prey. It hunts by exploiting the psychology of ambiguity. When a high-speed predator attacks, the prey's response is simple and binary. Flee immediately. The threat is obvious. But the lionfish weaponizes uncertainty. As it slowly encroaches on a cluster of juvenile fish, it operates just below the threshold of their panic reflex. It is moving toward them, yes, but not fast enough to trigger an explosive escape. The prey fish are confused. They recognize that a large object is entering their space. But because it is not acting aggressively, they do not scatter wildly into the safety of the rock. Instead, they simply back away. They drift backward a few inches, keeping their eyes on the strange, striped anomaly, waiting to see what it will do. They are waiting for a charge that is never going to come. By refusing to accelerate, the lionfish controls the tempo of the engagement. It takes the frantic, high-speed mathematics of the reef and slows them down to an agonizing crawl. And as the prey slowly back away, the true function of those beautiful, ornamental fins is revealed. The lionfish is not spreading its fins for a mating display. It is spreading them to build a cage. The massive, highly modified pectoral fins sweep forward, curving inward to form a translucent, living bowl. The long, separated rays of the fins act like the bars of a cell. As the lionfish inches forward, this physical barrier pushes the smaller fish away from the safety of the coral crevices and out into the open water, directly in front of the predator's mouth. The lionfish is corralling them. It is shaping the space around them. The small fish find themselves being gently, persistently herded. The sweeping fins block their peripheral escape routes. The reef is to their backs. The fin rays are on their flanks. And the gaping face of the predator is dead ahead. Because the advance is so glacial, the prey fish simply condense. They bunch tighter and tighter together, a localized ball of nervous energy, boxed by a predator that still hasn't made a single aggressive move. And here, the lionfish deploys a secondary, almost invisible tactic to seal the trap. As it closes the final few inches, staring down the condensed cluster of prey, the lionfish begins to manipulate the water itself. It purses its lips and forcefully exhales rapid, directed jets of water right at the small fish. In the sensory world of a fish, the lateral line is everything. It detects the subtle currents and pressure waves of the environment. When the lionfish blasts these concentrated jets of water, it completely scrambles the prey's lateral line system. The targeted fish become physically disoriented by the conflicting pressure signals. Even more deviously, the force of the water jet physically turns the prey. The small fish are pushed by the current, forcing the pivot, so that they are facing headfirst toward the lionfish. This is the optimal angle for consumption. Fish must be swallowed headfirst to prevent their sharp dorsal spines from catching in the predator's throat. The lionfish does not just corner its prey, it physically repositions them for easier swallowing. The setup is complete. The cage is locked. The prey are disoriented, bunched together, and facing the wrong direction. The execution is a stark, violent contradiction to the slow, hypnotic buildup. In a fraction of a millisecond, the lionfish's jaws unhinge and snap rapidly forward. The buccal cavity expands, creating a localized vacuum of immense power. The water, the space, and the disoriented fish are instantly inhaled. There is a muted, hollow thud of water collapsing into a void. The strike is so blindingly fast that the surrounding fish within the cluster often do not even realize their neighbor has vanished. They simply see the lionfish, still hovering slowly, still fanning its fins, completely undisturbed. The predator swallows, resets its jaw, and continues its glacial, creeping advance toward the next victim. It can systematically dismantle an entire school of juvenile fish, one by one, simply because it never breaks its hypnotic, terrifyingly slow rhythm. But a glaring question arises. To hunt this way, to float openly in the water column and move with such agonizing slowness, requires absolute arrogance. A predator moving at this speed is highly exposed. It is out in the open, highly visible, and making no attempt to camouflage itself. Why doesn't a larger predator, a reef shark, a massive moray eel, or Goliath grouper, simply swim up and bite the lionfish in half? The answer lies in the 18 needle-like spines rising from its back and underside. These are not just structural supports for its fins. They are biological hypodermic needles. Each spine is deeply grooved, and at the base of each groove sits a specialized venom gland. When pressure is applied to the spine, for instance, when the jaws of a shark clamp down on a lionfish's back, the sheath covering the spine is pushed downward, acting as a plunger. The venom is forced up the groove and injected deep into the attacker's flesh. This venom is a potent neuromuscular toxin. It is not necessarily designed to kill a massive predator, but is designed to inflict a level of pain so excruciating, so universally unbearable, that the attacker will instantly release the lionfish and never, ever attempt to eat one again. In humans, a lionfish sting causes immediate, intense, throbbing pain, swelling, sweating, and respiratory distress. In a predatory fish, the venom induces severe localized necrosis and systemic shock. The lionfish is a swimming fortress of agony. It advertises this fact through its brilliant, high-contrast coloration. The stripes of rust and white are not camouflage. They are aposematic coloration. It is a biological billboard broadcasting a universal warning. I am entirely toxic. Do not touch me, because it possesses this absolute chemical immunity. The lionfish does not need to hide. It does not need to swim fast. It has bought the privilege of slowness. It can afford to drift lazily through the reef, taking all the time it needs to meticulously construct its intimidation cages, because it knows with absolute certainty that nothing in the ocean is foolish enough to intervene. This method of hunting, the slow encroachment, the psychological manipulation, the venomous invulnerability, was perfected over millions of years in the Indo-Pacific and the Red Sea. In those waters, the lionfish is a natural part of the ecosystem. The native prey species have evolved alongside it. They recognize the stripe pattern. They have learned, through millions of years of genetic trial and error, that when the beautiful fan approaches, you do not hesitate. You do not back away slowly. You run. The ecosystem maintains a balance. But what happens when you take a predator that relies on psychological manipulation and drop it into an ocean that doesn't understand psychology? You get one of the most devastating ecological catastrophes in modern marine history through human interference, likely the dumping of unwanted aquarium pets. The lionfish was introduced to the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean Sea. These waters had never seen a lionfish before. When a lionfish descends onto a Caribbean reef, it is an alien. The native prey, the juvenile snappers of parrotfish, the cleaner shrimp, have zero evolutionary memory of this creature. Their genetic software does not contain a warning label for rust-colored stripes or sweeping, feather-like fins. When an invasive lionfish approaches a school of Caribbean damselfish, the prey do not run. They are completely naive to the threat. They look at the slow-moving, ornate creature with curiosity, or simply ignore it as a piece of drifting debris. They allow the lionfish to swim right up to their faces. They allow the fins to encircle them. By the time the vacuum strike occurs, it is far too late. The lionfish is exploiting an ecosystem that lacks a defensive vocabulary to understand it, and the results are apocalyptic. The lionfish is a glutton of unimaginable proportions. Its stomach can expand to accommodate up to 30 times its normal volume. A single lionfish can consume dozens of small fish in a single hour. It will eat continuously until it is physically gorged, spitting out the bones and hunting again. Because it has no natural predators in the Atlantic, the Caribbean sharks and groupers do not recognize as food, and the venomous spines deter the curious. The lionfish population exploded exponentially. A single female can release 2 million eggs a year. They spread like a plague of locusts across the reefs, stripping them bare of the juvenile fish that are required to keep the coral healthy. Without the herbivorous fish to eat the algae, the coral suffocates. Entire reef systems have been fundamentally silenced by a predator that simply floated into town and ate everything that didn't know it was supposed to run. It is a horrifying testament to the power of a specialized hunting strategy. The lionfish does not win by being the strongest. It does not win by being the fastest. It wins because it is a master of behavioral exploitation. It finds the exact space between comfort and panic. It occupies the hesitation. As twilight bleeds the color out of the coral, the frantic pace of the reef begins to shift. The daytime grazers are seeking shelter, their nervous systems on high alert for the fast-moving shadows of the evening hunters. Hovering just above a brain coral, the lionfish adjusts its buoyancy. It spots a small cluster of wrasses backing into a shallow depression. It angles its body downward. The pectoral fins unfurl, spreading wide like the wings of a descending angel. The predator inches forward. The wrasses watch it come. They twitch, their tail fins quivering, their brains try and process the data. It isn't charging. It isn't snapping. It is just arriving. They hesitate. They back up 1 inch. The fins close the perimeter. The water jets fire. The cage locks. The lionfish does not need to outrun the ocean. It simply teaches the ocean one fatal, hypnotic inch at a time, that waiting to see what happens next is the last mistake you will ever make. The ocean is often painted in our imaginations as a theater of uncontrollable chaos. We envision the feeding frenzy. We picture the boiling surface, the erratic splashing, the blood in the water, and the mindless, snapping jaws of predators driven by a blinding, insatiable hunger. We assume that when the apex killers of the sea go to work, they simply overpower the world through brute force and absolute savagery. But there is a predator that looks at the frenzy and sees only inefficiency. There is a predator that does not overwhelm by chaos, but dismantles by structure. The first strike is never random. It is rehearsed. It is calculated. And by the time the prey actually realizes it has been separated from the safety of its herd, the outcome of the hunt has already been permanently sealed. A seal bursts from the dark water in a state of absolute blind panic. It twists midair, its eyes wide, as massive black and white shapes slice silently through the water column beneath it. The ocean around the seal is silent. It is entirely too silent, right up until the exact moment the surface erupts in a display of flawless, terrifying coordination. One massive shape drives upward from below, forcing the seal to the surface. A second shape instantly slides into position to block the lateral escape route. A third shape hovers wide on the periphery. It is not chasing. It is not rushing. It is simply holding its position in the water, stationed perfectly like a chess piece placed several moves in advance to trap a king. This is not a hunt in the traditional sense. This is a controlled, systemic dismantling. To understand a killer whale, the orca, you must abandon the concept of the individual animal. You are not watching a single predator hunt. You are watching a distributed biological hive mind execute a military operation. Beneath the surface, the coordination of the pod begins long before physical contact is ever made. As the pod moves into a hunting ground, they spread out. They do not swim in a tight, clustered group. They space themselves deliberately, creating a massive, sweeping sensory net. And they do not just look at the ocean. They scan it with acoustic architecture. Acoustic clicks pulse outward from their melons in controlled, rhythmic bursts. These sound waves travel through water, strike objects, and bounce back. But the orca's echolocation is not a crude, low-resolution radar. It is a high-fidelity biological MRI. Through these returning echoes, the orca perceives distance, water density, and even the internal mass and structure of the animals swimming miles ahead of them. When the pod scans a herd of seals or a pod of smaller dolphins, they do not see a uniform group. They detect weakness not by sight, but by echo texture. A thin layer of blubber reflects sound differently than a thick, healthy layer. A tired, stressed animal swims with microscopic variations in its stroke rhythm. A frantic heartbeat echoes differently than a calm one. The orca pod identifies the vulnerability, the illness, the exhaustion before the chase even begins. The target is painted by sound. The first and ultimate objective is separation. Prey animals survive in groups because confusion protects them. A school of fish a herd of seals, a colony of penguins. These are all biological strategies built around the dilution of risk. The sheer math of the herd means any single individual is less likely to be eaten. Orcas understand this mathematical instinct perfectly, and because they understand it, they do not waste energy charging into the center of the mass. They fracture it from the outside in. Two individuals from the pod will flank wide, accelerating just enough to apply pressure to the edges of the group. As the predators close in, the prey instinctively bunch together. They tighten their formation, seeking the false safety of the center. That is the trap. As the herd compresses into a tight, panic ball, a third orca surges directly through the middle. This individual is not targeting a specific animal yet. Its only job is to drive pure, unadulterated panic into the core of the group. In that terrifying moment of violent compression and sudden scattering, the herd's discipline breaks. One weaker individual, perhaps the one identified minutes earlier by the echolocation scan, drifts half a body length too far from the safety of the cluster. That slight, seemingly insignificant spatial misalignment is enough. The entire pod pivots instantly. The acoustic signals shift. The massive group of prey becomes entirely irrelevant. Only the isolated individual matters now. The focus narrows to a laser point. This terrifying capacity for spatial manipulation is repeated across radically different ecosystems worldwide. In the freezing waters of the Antarctic, the environment presents a unique challenge. The prey, Weddell seals, do not stay in the water. They haul themselves out onto massive, floating platforms of sea ice. To a shark or a tuna, a seal on a block of ice is an unreachable target. The hunt is over, but the orca does not view the ice as an obstacle. It views the ice as a variable in a physics equation. When a pod spots a seal resting on a floe, they do not throw themselves fruitlessly against the frozen edge. They organize. Several massive individuals align themselves side by side in the water, facing the ice flow from a distance. With silent, synchronized precision, they begin to swim forward. They accelerate in perfect unison, beating their powerful flukes at the exact same rhythm, generating a massive, directed surge of water. They are actively creating a wave. The wall of water rolls forward, strikes the ice platform, and tilts it violently. The seal, an animal built perfectly for traction on solid ground and agility in the water, suddenly finds its world upended. The ice drops out from beneath it. The seal is washed into the freezing, turbulent sea, completely disoriented, terrified, and entirely alone. The pod is already waiting directly below the surface. The goal was never brute force. The goal was environmental manipulation. In the open ocean, when hunting massive schools of herring, the exact same principle applies, but the physics change. Instead of moving ice, they must move the fish. The pod herds a herring into a tight, swirling bait ball, compressing millions of fish into a dense, metallic sphere near the surface. Then comes the execution. But again, it is not a frenzy of biting. It is an exercise in caloric efficiency. An orca will turn its body and slap the edge of the bait ball with the flat, massive surface of its fluke. The concussive shockwave of the tail strike travels through the dense water, instantly stunning dozens, sometimes hundreds of fish. Even within this feast, there is absolute, chilling discipline. The roles within the pod rotate seamlessly. One orca stuns a fish. Another calmly consumes the floating victims. A third patrols the outer perimeter to ensure the bait ball does not expand. No energy is ever wasted. No movement overlaps unnecessarily. They do not fight fair. They fight with industrial efficiency. This rotation is the secret to their endurance. Unlike solitary pelagic hunters, like the tuna or the marlin, which must rely entirely on their own internal stamina to outlast prey, the orca distributes fatigue across a network. During prolonged chase of a fast, agile dolphin or a smaller whale, the attackers swap positions fluidly. The lead pursuer, pushing itself to its anaerobic limit, will eventually fall back before total exhaustion sets in. The exact moment it drops the chase, a perfectly fresh, rested individual surges forward from the rear of the formation to seamlessly take its place, maintaining absolute, unrelenting pressure on the target. The prey is running a marathon against a team running a relay race. The exhaustion of the predator is compartmentalized, while the exhaustion of the prey is cumulative. It is endurance through architecture, not individual stamina. But the most profound and terrifying reality of the orca is how this architecture is built. Young orcas are not born knowing how to create a wave. They are not born knowing how to herd a bait ball. These incredibly complex, multi-stage hunting patterns are not genetically hardwired into their DNA. They are learned. They are taught when a pod hunts. The calves and the younger, inexperienced adults act as shadows. They are positioned safely at the edges of the battlefield, acting purely as observers. They watch every flank, every tail slap, every acoustic cue. Mothers will sometimes deliberately disable a prey animal, breaking a seal's flipper or stunning a dolphin, without killing it. They then release the crippled animal back into the water, allowing the calves to practice the precise biting, flipping, and drowning techniques required for the kill. This is not cruelty for the sake of spectacle. It is a classroom. It is biological instruction. Skill transfer in orcas is entirely cultural. Hunting strategies vary wildly between different pods around the world because they are passed down socially. Some pods specialize exclusively in Chinook salmon. Others hunt nothing but marine mammals. Certain Antarctic populations focus entirely on the wave-washing technique for seals. And in parts of the Pacific, certain transient populations of orcas have developed a culture around hunting the ultimate apex predator, the great white shark. When confronting a massive, heavily armed shark, the orcas do not attempt prolonged, violent combat. A chaotic fight risks injury, and injury in the wild is a death sentence. Instead, they exploit a hidden flaw in the shark's neurological operating system. They utilize targeted anatomical exploitation. Through coordinated strikes, the pod rams the shark from the side, forcing it to flip completely upside down. When a shark is inverted, its brain enters a state of tonic immobility, a temporary involuntary paralysis. The great, terrifying killer of the sea becomes instantly limp and unresponsive. Once the shark is immobilized, the orca does not tear to shreds. It operates with surgical, chilling precision. It bites the shark exactly behind the pectoral fins, opening a specific cavity. It is looking for one thing: the liver. The liver of a great white shark is enormous, incredibly rich in lipids, and represents the most calorically dense, high-energy food source in the animal's body. The orca removes the liver with flawless efficiency, consumes it, and leaves the rest of the massive carcass largely untouched to sink to the seafloor. It is not random feeding. It is a selective, educated harvesting of a specific organ. This anatomical intelligence is applied to every species they hunt. They strike seals from below, knowing the soft belly offers less resistance than the armored spine. When harassing massive baleen whales, the pod coordinates to physically separate the vulnerable calf from its mother. They do not try to bite the massive whale to death. The goal is exhaustion. They swim over the top of the calf, physically pushing it down, preventing it from reaching the surface to breathe. They understand that the ocean is a three-dimensional battlefield where depth, air access, and spatial positioning matter far more than raw jaw strength. They kill the largest animals on Earth simply by denying them the sky, and they execute these murders in terrifying silence. When hunting mammals with acute hearing, like seals or other dolphins, the pod enforces strict acoustic discipline. The echolocation clicks stop, the vocalizations cease. They coordinate their complex movements entirely in the dark, modulating their own behavior based on the specific sensory capabilities of their prey. In some regions, they even weaponize deception. Orcas have been observed intentionally creating disturbances that appear accidental, a loud surface splash or an erratic movement by one individual that flushes a hiding prey animal out of cover and directly toward the hidden, silent members of the pod. The prey genuinely believes it is executing a perfect escape from danger, when in reality, it is being expertly guided down a pre-planned corridor of death. What looks like improvisation to the untrained eye is, in fact, pre-planned geometry. At the center of this terrifying, living machine sits the matriarch. Orca societies are led by older females, individuals possessing decades of accumulated, living data. The matriarch is the ecological memory of the pod. She remembers the ancient migration routes. She remembers the seasonal abundance of specific prey in specific fjords. She remembers the historical patterns of famine and decline. When the ocean changes, the matriarch adjusts the algorithm, When seal populations alter their haul-out patterns, the matriarch changes the wave-washing timing. In some coastal areas where human longline fishing has decimated local fish stocks, matriarchs have taught their pods how to systematically strip the hooked fish from miles of underwater lines without ever getting caught on the hooks themselves. They observe the human machine, they adapt to it, they refine their approach, and they steal the harvest with zero risk. They anticipate, they model outcomes. Their heavily convoluted neocortex allows them to predict how a prey animal will respond to a specific pressure, transforming the hunt from a reflex into a mathematical calculation. Yet, this unparalleled sophistication carries profound, ecosystem-altering consequences. When orcas decide to eliminate great white sharks from a specific coastal zone, the ecological ripples are massive. Sharks regulate the mid-level predators. Remove the sharks, and the mesopredator populations explode, which in turn alters the distribution of grazing fish, which eventually reshapes the fundamental health of the entire reef system. The orca is not just a hunter. It is the architect of the marine balance. But within this supreme dominance lies their single, fatal vulnerability. The entire foundation of their success depends completely on their social cohesion and their cultural memory. A fragmented pod loses its tactical efficiency. If a matriarch is lost, decades of migratory and strategic memory are erased with her. If oceanic noise pollution from shipping lanes disrupts their delicate acoustic network, the geometry of the trap falls apart. The very intelligence that makes them the undisputed, invincible masters of the ocean also makes them entirely dependent on the fragile continuity of their own culture. Their strength is not housed in the muscle of the individual. It is housed in the collective planning of the family. The final image of the hunt lingers in the freezing water as the sun dips below the horizon. The surface of the sea is calm, mirroring the darkening sky. A pod surfaces together, their dorsal fins breaking the water in perfect, synchronized timing. They exhale, sending thick plumes of mist into the fading light. Beneath them, the ocean holds its silence once again. The execution is complete. There was no frenzy. There was no chaotic struggle. There was no wasted motion. There was only isolation, rotation, targeting, and inherited knowledge playing out with cold, surgical calm. They did not overpower the sea. They organized it, and in that organization, they proved that the true apex predator does not hunt with its teeth. It hunts with its mind. The wild does not fight fair, and its greatest secrets are often hidden in the darkest shadows. If this journey into the unseen architecture of our planet altered your perspective, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. The ocean is vastly more terrifying, complex, and magnificent than we can ever imagine, and we are just scratching the surface. To continue exploring these brutal and beautiful realities, subscribe to Earth's documentary and turn on notifications. The next dive into the deep is already beginning. Will you be there to witness it?